Chapter 307. Getting Something with Nothing 1. Sui Huang really lives up to his name. A sacred clan indeed. Impressive. Wang Xian saw Sui family's spiritual medicine garden in a cave and praised Sui Huang. The space before them was filled with various spiritual medicine, and most of them came with fire attribution. All of the spiritual grass was glistering, and all of it ranged from level 3 to level 5. Right in the middle was level 6 spiritual grass. All the different varieties added up to a few hundred tufts of spiritual grass in total with an inestimable value. Stop your bootlicking. Even if you do so, I'll not hand over my arts of refining elixir pills to you. Sui Huang snorted with eyes full of haughtiness. He remembered that this lad had exploded domineering oppression to compete with him when they first met. Obviously, Wang Xian had wanted to overwhelm him on their first encounter. Now he finally gained back some face. Heh. Wang Xian was not embarrassed at all despite the fact that his trick was discovered. He laughed. Didn't you ask me how I managed to raise my spiritual grass so easily the other time? This has got something to do with my physique, and I'm a doctor. As Wang Xian spoke, he walked and put his hand in the garden. Read more chapter on novel full. All the spiritual grass was glowing with faint luster, as it absorbed the immense azure dragon energy injected into the garden. Who? Wang Xian pretended to be tired as he wiped the film of sweat he purged from his forehead. Then he smiled at old Sui. How is it? Look at the spiritual medicine garden. Don't you think their vitality has increased? That's true. Old Sui was taken aback as he looked at the spiritual medicine garden. The spiritual grass grew livelier after Wang Xian placed his hand in the garden. Even those that were dying came back to life completely. You're welcome. Wang Xian smiled and waved his hands. Old Sui's face turned black as soon as he heard him. Who wants to thank you? All right, it's almost time. Tonight's disciple acceptance ceremony will begin soon, said Old Sui to Wang Xian. Okay, I'll observe from the side and see how you guys hold the ceremony, Wang Xian said with a beaming face as he followed behind. Laozu. Great-grandfather. Grandfather. As soon as they walked out of the cave, they saw the descendants of Sui family walking toward the sacred mountain. They were slightly taken aback when they saw Sui Huang walking out. Immediately, they bowed to him with respect. Okay. Sui Huang nodded and entered the same room that he had come out of just now. Sui family members gazed at Wang Xian with doubts. They did not understand why a young man was standing beside Laozu. Master. Guan Shuqing, who was waiting in the room, came out immediately as soon as Wang Xian and Sui Huang stepped in. Beautiful. Beautiful. Sui Huang looked at Guan Shuqing with a satisfied expression on his face and chuckled. Guan Shuqing was wearing some vintage wear that resembled those uniforms from before the 1950s. Her clothes were all black with a flower embroidered at the chest. On it was written, too. This represented the second generation of Sui family, and also the disciple of Sui Huang. Sui family's uniforms looked the same except for the numbers at the chest to distinguish the generations. Yes, you're quite pretty. Wang Xian smiled at the side, as the design of Sui family's uniform was beautiful. Let's go. It's almost time, Sui Huang said to them as he looked at the wall clock that was almost striking 5 p.m. Guan Shuqing nodded. The group of people followed Sui Huang to the mountain summit. There was a small square half the size of a stadium on the summit. It did not seem crowded even with more than 1,000 people standing there. On the summit were some tables with food. The dishes were simple, just like the home-cooked food of any ordinary families. Back in the center were 9 cauldrons. The one in the middle was the biggest, about 5 meters in size, with flames burning in it. It was surrounded by another 8 smaller cauldrons. The cauldron in the middle was known as the Emperor Cauldron. Starting from the north in a clockwise direction, the 8 cauldrons were known as Bao, Du, Cong, Gang, Tong, Fu, Jing, and Kuei cauldrons. 9 cauldrons represented prosperity for the nation and family. This meant that Sui family would prosper forever. There was a central seat and 2 accompanying seats just below it at both sides. The 3 seats were empty at the moment. All the members of Sui family aged 5 and above were all present. They turned their attention to Sui Huang as soon as they arrived. Wang Xian, you shall sit beside me. Disciple, you shall stand at the center position. Sui Huang said to Wang Xian and Guan Shuqing. Allowing Wang Xian to take the accompanying seat was a form of recognition of his ability, as though he was on par with Sui Huang. Therefore, he was fit to sit in that seat. The other accompanying seat was saved for today's main highlight, Guan Shuqing. Wang Xian and the rest nodded. Lan Qingyue and Xiao Yu took the seats at the furthest end. Following Sui Huang to the central position, Wang Xian smiled as he took the accompanying seat. Sui family members were surprised to see a young man sitting over there. All of them found it unbelievable. How could such a young fellow deserve to sit on that accompanying seat? What ability did he possess? All the second-generation members were seated below them. But since Lao Zu did not make any comment, the rest of the people did not dare to say a word. I'm sure you know why we're gathered here today. I, Sui Huang, have taken a new disciple. She will be my last disciple. Sui Huang stood up slowly as he overlooked everyone on the stage as he spoke. Wang Xian did not pay attention to the cumbersome ceremony procedures of the sacred clan. Instead, he observed the people below him. The entire sacred clan Sui family's strength was gathered in this place. All the experts in the Sui family were present. 23 inborn experts. TSK. Sui family possesses quite a formidable strength. An alchemist indeed. He can nurture experts at a rapid speed. Wang Xian exclaimed. He recalled that the number of inborn experts that Flame Palace had, including those who joined at a later stage, was only about 16. A single Sui family already had 23 of them. With such a strong expert like Sui Huang around, the Flame Palace was never a match. The ceremony was usually cumbersome for ancient families. Kneeling and bowing, serving tea, and paying respects took around 10 minutes. Okay, disciple. Come over. After the procedures, Sui Huang beckoned Guan Shuqing over with a beaming face. Yes, master. Guan Shuqing smiled and took a seat by his side. Congratulations to father for accepting an outstanding disciple. Junior sister, how are you? These are some gifts. I hope you like them. At this time, several elders who were sitting in front stood up on both sides. They bowed to Sui Huang and took out their gifts one by one. All of you have put in the effort. Shaoqing, accept them. They should give you gifts. Chapter 308. Getting something with nothing too. Yes, master. Guan Shuqing nodded her head. After which she walked over and said, Thank you, Martial Senior Brothers, for your gifts. Hehe, you are welcome. We will be one family in the future. If there's anything we can help you with, feel free to let us know. Several 90-plus-year-old elders replied with smiles. Although they were old, they were in the pink of health. This might be because they were all inborn experts. Junior sister, this is a defective flame ball. It's a shame that I can't find a complete one. I have been using it for more than 10 years and have little use for it now. I'd like to give this to Junior sister as something you can use to protect yourself. Junior sister, this is the highest level elixir pill I can refine right now. It's a level 3 elixir pill and highly nourishing for a girl's skin. I don't know what kind of weapons Junior sister uses. Therefore, I'd like to give this jade dagger to Junior sister. A few old men took out their gifts and handed them over to Guan Shuqing. Thank you. Thank you, Martial Senior Brothers. Guan Shuqing thanked them immediately. Hehe, you're welcome. I heard Junior sister reached level 9 martial artist after just a month of cultivation. We are really embarrassed in comparison. You might just be able to reach the level of our father in the future. The 5 sons of Sui Huang exchanged pleasantries with Guan Shuqing. Clearly, they knew what the junior sister in front of them would become in the future. Thank you for all your gifts. I really like them. Guan Shuqing felt spoilt by the gifts she received. The gifts from them were truly valuable and she really fancied the gifts. Wang Xian stayed by the side and smiled. The people of the Sui family were generous and the gifts were all highly valuable. Read more chapter on novel full. It's been close to 10 years since I have gathered everyone here. The oldest of the 5th generation children are already 29 years old. Let me see the strength of these kids. Sui Huang looked plainly at the last row of disciples and shouted, "Yes, Grandpa. 5th generation of the Sui family. Step forward now. Show your strength to your Laozu." The current clan leader of the Sui family stood up and shouted at the crowd of 5th generation disciples. A group of young people and teenagers stood up immediately. Surprisingly, there were close to 100 of them. "Lift the cauldron," shouted the clan leader. The group of young people and teenagers nodded their heads and stepped forward to the large cauldron in the middle of the room. "Ha!" a young man shouted as he grabbed a large cauldron. Expending all his strength, he lifted the large cauldron up. His face was flushed as a result. "Ha! Ha! Ha!" One after another, the young people and teenagers grabbed cauldrons of various sizes and lifted them up. Wang Xian noted that the weight of each cauldron was different. One could tell the strength of them by looking at the cauldron they lifted. Level 5, Level 6, Level 7, Level 8, Level 9. Wang Xian looked across inquisitively. Other than a young man who had managed to lift the Level 9 cauldron, the rest were all weaker than this level. It's pretty impressive for a 25-26-year-old young man to lift a Level 9 cauldron. However, for a Saint-class force that's not really acceptable, Wang Xian thought to himself. At this moment Sui Huang, who was sitting in the middle, was clearly not very pleased. As the surrounding people noticed the displeasure on Sui Huang's face, they also started feeling a little fearful. The most outstanding disciple in this generation was Sui Ao, and we spent lots of resources on him. He has even reached the half-step to Inborn Realm. It's a shame that he courted his own demise. Seeing the displeasure on Sui Huang, the other members of the Sui family whispered softly among themselves. To be only at this level when they are in such a good environment and enjoying such great resources, it seems like this generation couldn't match the previous ones at all. Sui Huang gave his comments emotionlessly. Saying that this generation couldn't match previous generations was harsh but factual. "Grandpa, this is my failure. It's all my fault." The current clan leader of Sui family immediately went on his knees and asked Sui Huang for forgiveness. Cold sweat covered his face. "Please calm down, father." The group of old men immediately stood up and said, "You guys must be getting more and more complacent and must have lost the drive from before." The most outstanding disciple actually gathered a group and behaved like a group of thugs against my disciple in the middle of the night. Who's the one that gives them the right to be so imperious? Sui Huang said plainly. All the other members of the Sui family felt their hearts skip a beat. The current generation of the Sui family was disappointing him. If their Laozu was angry, the whole Sui family would be shivering in fear. No one in the field even dared to breathe loudly, for fear of drawing the rage of their Laozu. Sui Huang's current aura. Hee. Wang Xian showed a mouth of teeth as he smiled. He looked at the group of 100 people standing in the middle of the field. Suddenly, a thought struck him and he revealed a smile. "Sui Huang, your Sui family has gotten worse by the generation. When I visited the newly crowned sacred sect, Flame Palace, a while back, they had 2 outstanding disciples who are on the outstanding young heroes chart. It appears that your family doesn't even have one." Wang Xian said with a mocking tone, and his voice resounded in the field. Everyone could hear him clearly. The surrounding crowd was taken aback and looked at Wang Xian in shock. They were furious but embarrassed. A young man said right in the face of their Laozu that the descendants of the Sui family were all trash. This was equivalent to openly mocking and criticizing them. It was especially so on this occasion. When Sui Huang heard Wang Xian, his face turned gloomy instantly. He also knew that his descendants weren't great at all. However, he didn't need an external person to point it out so blankly. "Please choose your words carefully, young man. Our sacred clan isn't something that anyone can look down on. Comparing us with Flame Palace, who has been annihilated, you have gone overboard. Rascal! Apologize immediately." 2 old men from the 3rd generation of the Sui family looked solemnly at Wang Xian and demanded. Saying this in the face of the entire Sui family infuriated the members of Sui family, even though Wang Xian was sitting next to Sui Huang. "Hehe. The mentality of you guys isn't right. You should be ashamed instead of angry over what I've said. Perhaps you guys have lost yourself under the halo of the sacred clan." Wang Xian sat on the elevated platform and spoke to them in a tone as though he was educating them. Looking at how Wang Xian was behaving, all the other members of the Sui family felt embarrassed. Sui Huang, who was beside Wang Xian, also pulled a long face. What rights do you have to criticize us? What kind of strength do you have? A young man from the Sui family stood up and shouted angrily. That's right. What rights do you have? Another young man stood up and questioned Wang Xian bitterly. If it wasn't for Wang Xian being close to their Laozu, the inborn experts of the Sui family might have struck and annihilated him. Just 4 people? That's too few. Come. It's not that I'm looking down on you guys. All the 4th and 5th generation disciples step forward. I'll show you what qualifications I have to say that. Wang Xian's lips curved into a smile. Shaking one of his legs while sipping on tea, he looked down on all of them as he spoke. His behavior was like suggesting everyone here was just trash in his eyes. His arrogant words and brazen expression immediately aroused the anger and fury of all members of the Sui family. Chapter 309 Succeed. Boom. You're tired of living. How dare you insult Sui family? As soon as Wang Xian finished his sentence, hundreds of disciples of all ages and generations stood up and glowered at Wang Xian. Lad, watch how you're talking. Who are you to speak to us like this? Apologize now or else. An outstanding middle-aged inborn expert stared at Wang Xian coldly as he spoke. Hundreds of Sui family's disciples exploded with immense heat, as they gathered like a furnace trying to melt Wang Xian away. Just 2 inborn experts. Wang Xian shook his head slowly and took a sip of tea before he placed it on the table. Roar! A soft dragon bellow came from Wang Xian's mouth. Subsequently, he spat out a dragon ball. Roar! Once the dragon ball came into sight, it turned into Fire Divine Dragon immediately. The 7-meter-long Divine Dragon dived towards the 4th and 5th generation of Sui family's disciples rapidly. Imposing demeanor and domineering oppression struck fear into all the people around the area. What? A 2nd-generation old man from Sui family was aghast as soon as he saw the domineering oppression exploded from the Fire Divine Dragon. He quickly stood up and faced the Fire Divine Dragon. Her. Wang Xian frowned slightly as he looked at the old man. Sit down. As Wang Xian shouted softly, the old man, who was about to stand up, grimaced. His body was trembling violently. He turned his head with disbelief as he gazed at Wang Xian with astonishment. The rest of Sui Huang's sons who were around were also shocked as they looked at Wang Xian. A soft bellow and the imposing demeanor that was exuded was able to trap their leader. They were dumbfounded by the domineering strength. They swallowed saliva in disbelief. Could it be? They looked at Wang Xian in horror, and then back at their father again. At this point, Sui Huang was knitting his eyebrows at Wang Xian. He could not make sense of what Wang Xian was doing. But Sui Huang did not make any comment as he, too, realized that the Sui family members had such a good life that they had forgotten to stay vigilant. Roar! Just then, the Fire Divine Dragon arrived above the 4th and 5th generations of Sui family in the field. Daunting dragon power encompassed them over their heads, and the blazing flame struck fear on their faces. That's scary. A 5th-generation disciple was appalled as he quickly fled to a far distance. Divine Dragon. This is the legendary Divine Dragon. More disciples collapsed immediately onto the ground, as they were aghast. Roar! Another dragon roar was heard. 500 to 600 4th and 5th generation disciples let out a sharp and painful shriek as intense flames swept across. Most of the disciples of different ages were injured as fear crawled all over their faces. They were crying in pain as they rolled on the floor. Only a handful of people, 5 or 6, stood below with determination as they gazed at the dragon in the sky with pale faces. Child, my child! Child, stop it! The elders from Sui family broke out heart-wrenching pleads. The situation turned chaotic on the sacred mountain of Sui family. Yet, not only Sui Huang, but the 2nd and 3rd generation elders also darkened their expressions upon seeing such a situation. They were not furious at Wang Xian, who had made a joke out of their descendants. Instead, they were outraged by the performance of their younger generations. Coward, coward! A second-generation old man of Sui family gritted his teeth. He lowered his head with shame. Sui family's clan leader was so ashamed that he shook his head. Sigh. Just then Wang Xian let out a sigh on the stage. He was looking upset as he took out 6 glowing beads slowly from his arms. 6 of them were giving off a mixture of sapphire and red glow, which made them look creepy. Sui Huang was astonished as he stared at the 6 beads in Wang Xian's hand. Old Sui, these are 6 meridians clearing beads, which I obtained, almost at the expense of my life. Wang Xian pretended to be distressed as he spoke. With a swift movement, he appeared in the center of Sacred Mountain. Only 6 people were standing in the square at this time, with 2 middle-aged men, young men, and juveniles each. Roar! The divine dragon above them let out a roar and enveloped them with 6 individual flames. They were the body-refining flame from body-refining spiritual flame balls. Painful looks were left on the 6 faces as the flames were injected into their bodies. The 6 beads that were glowing in a mixture of sapphire and red colors in Wang Xian's palm went directly into their mouths. Bam bam bam. Wang Xian walked to a middle-aged man and jerked his arm. He injected a gust of dragon energy into the middle-aged man and unblocked his last conception vessel and governing vessel. Boom! An immense inborn power came from him. Subsequently, Wang Xian swung his arm and came to another middle-aged man and repeat his actions. Boom! Another inborn oppression was felt. At this time, those Sui family members who had been screaming in pain on the floor, or had been distressed over the scene, were stupefied. All of them watched in shock at what had just happened. This. 2 middle-aged half-step to inborn experts had stepped up to inborn realm. At this time Wang Xian did not stop. He came to the remaining young men and juveniles and repeated what he had just did. My meridians have all been unblocked. An excited voice came from a young girl who was the only female standing in the field. She looked to be at most 19. She was trembling with joy as she sensed the changes in her body. Mine too. I have made a breakthrough to half-step to inborn. Another young man was exclaiming excitedly at the top of his lungs too. All 8 extraordinary meridians have been unblocked? Made it directly to half-step to inborn? All the people around were stunned by the 6 persons as they looked shocked on their faces. Everyone slowly turned their attention to that young man who had a casual smile as if nothing in the world bothered him. Wang Xian smiled as he swung his arm. A gust of azure dragon seeped into the bodies that were lying around on the floor, whose injuries recovered swiftly. In a move, Wang Xian leaped to his seat, picked up the teacup on the side and took a sip. We recovered from our injuries. Yes, that's true. What amazing medical skills. Those people who picked themselves up from the ground were shocked as they observed their bodies. Suddenly, a young man muttered, "We seem to have missed an opportunity." All of them were stunned as they quickly spun around and looked at the 6 people. Only they had persisted up to the very end. Now, their 8 extraordinary meridians were all unblocked. This was the opportunity, a big opportunity. Thank you, young master, for your kindness. Thank you, young master, for your kindness. The 2nd and 3rd generations of Sui family quickly stood up from their table and greeted respectfully. They were no longer enraged or infuriated as before, instead showing a high level of respect for this young man since he had done so much for the good of Sui family. Chapter 310. Spiritual Island on the Sea. Thank you, young master, for your kindness. Beside the cauldron, the 6 disciples of Sui family, whose 8 extraordinary meridians had been cleared by Wang Xian, kneeled on the floor respectfully and expressed their gratitude. Around them, after seeing their seniors had stood up to thank Wang Xian, the other members knew that they had to do the same. Therefore, they stood up one after another and said loudly, "Thank you, young master, for your kindness." Wang Xian, who was sitting beside Sui Huang, waved his hand plainly, following which, he turned to Sui Huang and said, "Old Sui, those are meridian clearing beads that I went through great lengths and dangers to get. All right. I know what you are after, rascal." Sui Huang gave him a glare before continuing, "Follow me back after this. I'll let you take a look at the arts of refining elixir pills." "Thank you, old Sui." Wang Xian smiled, as he'd gotten something he wanted without giving up anything. No, he did give up something. Other than putting up a show, he exhausted some dragon energy. Hee. Wuxia was thrilled. By showing kindness to the Sui family in this manner, Sui Huang wouldn't be stingy considering his personality. After all, he had increased the numbers of inborn experts in Sui family by 6. This wasn't a small gift. Alright, I believe you guys have seen the problem today. I don't wish to see this again. Sui Huang instructed the members of the Sui family. The performance of the 4th and 5th generation of the Sui family was really terrible. This had infuriated Sui Huang. However, the gift Wuxia took out was indeed able to make up for some of these weaknesses. This was also the reason why Sui Huang agreed directly to allow Wuxia to take a look at the arts of refining elixir pills. Who's the young man with our Laozu? He's really incredible. The ball he spat out from his mouth could actually turn into a divine dragon that even inborn experts couldn't withstand. The ability to heal the injuries on everyone with a wave of his hand is really amazing. If he can sit beside our Laozu, he must be at the same level as our Laozu. At the same level? Oh gosh. He's so young and yet he's already at the same level as our Laozu? Unbelievable superpower. That's what a real expert is. As the ceremony ended, the group saw their Laozu leave with Wuxia. The disciples of the Sui family were whispering fervently and were clearly in awe. Even the 2nd generation of the Sui family had to look at the figure in fear and respect as they sighed. Wuxia could hear the constant compliments and worship of the Sui family's disciples behind him. Subconsciously, he revealed a faint smile. He followed behind Sui Huang and arrived at a cave enthusiastically. This is the book recording the arts of refining elixir pills. I'm only allowing you to read for a night. Within a cave, Sui Huang took out a simple-looking book made of parchment paper. On the parchment paper, dense ancient text was written all over. Luckily, what was comforting was that there were various papers slotted in between the parchment sheets. These were the explanations for the ancient text. Alright. Thank you, old Sui. I'll give you a godly elixir pill after I refine them. Wuxia laughed. After informing Guan Shuqing, Xiao Yu and the rest, he took up the arts of refining elixir pills and started going through them. Puff. I hope it works. Wuxia took a deep breath. If he could extract dragon energy from spiritual medicine, he should be able to do the same for elixir pills. Going further based on what Sui Huang had explained, an elixir pill had 10 times the effects of spiritual medicine. That would mean that the dragon energy within the elixir pill was at least several times that of the spiritual grass. In that case, refining an elixir pill could also allow him to increase his strength level quickly. Furthermore, although he was able to raise dragonians rapidly to the inborn realm, it would be extremely difficult for him to raise them to the Dan realm. Even if he wished to help, it wouldn't work. Therefore, if he could refine powerful elixir pills and if he had the ability to breed spiritual grass and medicine, he could raise the strength level of dragonians to the Dan realm rapidly or even to a higher level. Wuxia flipped through the arts of refining elixir pills slowly as he memorized each word on it. Ding! Grasped the arts of refining elixir pills. After 5 hours, the notification of the system sounded in his mind. Wuxia revealed a faint smile. Name Wuxia. Race. 5 elements divine dragon. Able to transform into a human. Level 7. Dragon energy 1963 421/10000000. Superpower. Dominate marine animals, ability to rule any marine animals that are lower than your own level. Devour any form of marine animals for extraction of dragon energy. 5 elements control. Art of cultivation. Divine dragon transformation. Arts of refining elixir pills. Alchemist apprentice. Refine all elixir pills in the world with the origin source flame. Wuxia looked at his personal attributes through the system and noticed a new arts of refining elixir pills under his art of cultivation. Moreover, the introduction of his arts of refining elixir pills looked much stronger. Refine all elixir pills with the origin source flame. I wonder how strong the arts of refining elixir pills is. However, I'm just an alchemist apprentice at this moment. Should I try to refine some elixir pills? Level 3 elixir pills and below would not require an alchemy furnace to refine. However, it would still require a fire attribute cultivator. It's a shame that I do not have any spiritual grass or medicine with me currently. I'll find time to give this a try after I get back, Wuxia thought to himself. The entire arts of refining elixir pills was written on 30 to 40 pages of parchment paper. Other than the first few pages which introduced the method of refining elixir pills, the rest were all elixir pill recipes. An elixir pill recipe was very important to an alchemist. Without an elixir pill recipe, it would be extremely difficult for one to refine elixir pills by self-discovery. Wuxia looked through it for the entire night. Along the way, he visualized the process. Finally, he had completely memorized all the contents on the parchment paper. Brother Wuxia, how are you doing? The next morning, Sui Huang smiled radiantly as he walked into the cave and asked Wuxia. Understood and digested completely. A grandmaster alchemist is about to surface in this world. Wuxia smiled and answered Sui Huang in a joking manner. Oh, is that so? It seems like Brother Wuxia's arts of refining elixir pills will be surpassing all that comes before you, and you will soon rule the world with it. Sui Huang replied with a little sarcasm. Wuxia smiled and handed the parchment book back to Sui Huang. We will be returning back home today. Old Sui, do you want to go back with us? I'll return tomorrow. I still have some family matters to handle. Sui Huang answered and shook his head. Wuxia nodded his head, exchanged some casual words and left the cave. Young master. At this moment, Emo Qinglong came to him and reported, Young master, it's about the Dragonians. Oh, what's the matter? Wuxia asked immediately. They had found the real culprit behind the incident of Emo Ersan and Emo Sanyi previously. However, Wuxia had instructed Emo Yuan to investigate the source instead of taking revenge immediately. One of our brothers found a piece of spiritual land on the sea, said Emo Qinglong enthusiastically. Spiritual land? Wuxia was shocked and felt confused. Emo Sherwu found a well-hidden island in the sea. The island has dense spiritual energy on it. Based on his conjecture, it should be the remains of an ancient sect and there should still be treasures on it. However, the island was surrounded by strong marine animals guarding it. The island was also extremely mysterious. Emo Sherwu didn't find the island by himself. Those that were with him have already informed their families and sects. If that was really the ruins of a sect, there might be quite an amount of spiritual medicine in it. It might even have more spiritual treasures. Chapter 311. Patrolling Yuxia 1. The ruins of the ancient sect is the spiritual island? Wuxia wondered with a tinge of fervor. Since meeting the Sui family yesterday and having witnessed their possession of countless spiritual grasses and treasures, Wuxia had realized his destitution. He had $2 billion cash on hand as capital, but he had since handed all of this to Lan Qingyue, in request that the Lan family help with the procurement of gold and silver. The construction of the Dragon Palace was 40% complete. Based on estimates, he predicted that the palace would be completed within 2 more months. Aside from these $2 billion, he possessed no treasures otherwise. He also paled in comparison to the Sui family when it came to forces and manpower. Currently, the Sui family had more than 20 inborn experts. Meanwhile, of the Dragonians in the Dragon sect, the only inborn experts were Emo Yuan and Emo Qinglong. Given their speed of cultivation, it would take another month before the remaining Dragonians could set foot in the inborn realm. By then, the abilities of his forces would be rather prominent, with 50 inborn experts as his henchmen. The Dragon Palace will need upgrading after its completion, which means the consumption of resources will be even greater. I'd better prepare beforehand. Would be best if I had the means to earn spiritual stones in the long run, Wuxia thought to himself. He would have to go all out for these ruins of the ancestral sect, given that he had way too few resources on hand, so much so that even a level 1 force was richer than him. Where's the spiritual island located? Let's head right over today. Wuxia exclaimed to Emo Qinglong without the slightest hesitation. It's about 500 kilometers away from Rivertown in the open sea. Emo Qinglong replied. Young master, Should we gather the Dragonians from the dragon sect? Dragonians? That's not necessary. Wang Xian shook his head. Since the henchmen from the Dragon Palace are always standing by in combat mode, there was no need for the Dragonians when it came to ocean battles. Moreover, based on their current combat abilities, the Dragon Palace would, in fact, be far superior to the Dragon Sect. Bring Mo Yuan along. The three of us shall rush over from Rivertown, Wang Xian said to Mo Qinglong. Yes, young master. Mo Qinglong nodded in response. Wang Xian came to the Sihiyuan and found Guan Shuqing, Lan Qingyue, Xiao Yu and Elder Feng. He proceeded to inform them about the plan. Returning so soon? I'd planned to have fun for another 2 days. Xiao Yu whined. Here's the deal. Isn't winter break arriving around the corner? When it does, I'll take you out for some fun. Wang Xian pacified with a smile. Thereafter, he purchased flight tickets and together, everyone made their way to Rivertown the same afternoon. At mid-afternoon, Wang Xian and the group arrived at the villa. Wang Xian boarded the yacht with embarrassment as Guan Shuqing and Lan Qingyue gazed in dismay. Young master, we'll have to rush over at the soonest time possible. Mo Sherwu has reported sightings of 3 major forces gathering around Spiritual Island, Mo Yuan reminded Wang Xian. Yep. Wang nodded in acknowledgement. As he stood on the deck, his heart stirred. Shum, shum, shum. In the nearby waters, creatures surfaced one by one. As they emerged, they opened their eyes and gathered around a gigantic turtle. Follow the Dragon King. Prime Minister Turtle commanded members of the Dragon Palace. As he did, he shook the mud off himself and opened his eyes slightly. Yes, Prime Minister Turtle. The members nodded in acknowledgement. The force was comprised of Roving Heavens, Roving Girl, Roving Lobster, and 9 venomous sea snakes. They were also followed by devil monkeys from the Devil Division, led by Roving Heavens. Together, the devilish creatures followed closely beneath the yacht as it pressed on. After a period of cultivation, all members of the Dragon Palace had undergone massive changes. The appearance of Roving Girl had become increasingly human-like. So much so that an outline of her nose and eyes formed and became more defined, with droplets lining their edges. As for Roving Lobster, its physical size grew up to 3 meters. It shimmered in a body of gold, while its 2 mammoth pincers added to its majestic air. Being the first 2 under Wang Xian's wing, the combat abilities of both Roving Girl and Roving Lobster had reached level 10. These 2 aside, the ones with the next most changes were the devil monkeys. Right now, scales had grown on the bodies of nearly 800 of them as they glowed in the flames of the devil dragon, while their claws and teeth sharpened by the day. Other than Roving Heavens, whose combat powers had reached level 11, 3 of the 800 devil monkeys had also hit level 10. The majority of the rest had also reached between level 8 and level 9. It would not be long before all devil monkeys could conquer ocean battles, armed with a level 10 prowess. The yacht soared ahead, making a dash for the open sea. Close to 7 hours later, Wang Xian and gang finally closed in on where Mo Sherwu was. Over here, Wang Xian asked with squinted eyes as he surveyed the area ahead. Just then, as it descended at the far end of the horizon, the last rays of the evening sun shone upon the sea surface. But Wang Xian soon discovered, to his astonishment, a thick fog surrounding the areas in front. And just up ahead, the misty fog continued to ascend. The ocean is a magical place, where mystical seas are filled with miraculous creatures. Wang Xian recalled reading a book. It introduced the oceans as vast seas which held secrets far exceeding man's imagination. For one, there was the most renowned Bermuda Triangle with its magnetic field. The fields were so unique, they resulted in aircraft malfunctions and the sinking of ships. In addition, there was also the continent which had disappeared in history. The various mysteries which were yet to be unveiled. It's right ahead. Mo Sherwu is on a yacht over there. Mo Qinglong exclaimed as he pointed to a location on the left. Wang Xian gazed over. Up ahead, more than 20 yachts had docked in the seas, along with 2 huge fishing vessels. On the deck stood many martial artists, each staring at the fog ahead. Vaguely, an island appeared amidst the misty fog. Yet none of the ships around had dared to make a dash for the island, as if out of fear of something. As the yacht approached, The arrival of the group drew immediate attention from the nearby crowd. Huh. Some on board the other ships frowned as they looked over. It's my seniors, Emo Sherwu said to the rest of the crowd. He was on another yacht with more than a dozen on board. Are these the people you've gathered? We've made a pact. Everyone must go all out in order to make it inside. Otherwise, you are not qualified to enter the spiritual island, a young man said bluntly to Emo Sherwu. That's for sure. All based on merit. Emo Sherwu chirped as a smile lifted his face gently. In one move, he hopped onto the yacht which ferried Wang Xian and gang. Just those few? I'm afraid they're going to perish in the sea, the young man said indifferently while he looked at Emo Sherwu from behind. To which, another young man swept his gaze across the yacht which had just arrived. He then looked back at his ship, where the yacht flag bearing a Thunderbolt logo flew high. Emo Sherwu's a formidable one. His seniors are likely inborn experts not to be reckoned with. But regarding this spiritual island, the Lei family is bent on making it ours. He continued. Haha. It remains to be seen who will be the final one to make it inside. A group of young men sneered at the side. As Emo Sherwu leaped onto the yacht, he knelt down immediately to pay respects to Wang Xian. Dragon King, he greeted. How are things going right now? Wang Xian smiled in response and asked as he glanced at the fog ahead. Just then, a strange creature began to emerge briefly. With an elongated fishtail, it bore a grim face. It had a long front claw that resembled a two-pronged fork, measuring about 3 meters long. A petrifying yet bizarre sea creature, perhaps. Chapter 312. Patrolling Yaksha 1. Hoo. At this moment, that creature let out a howl that propagated several thousands of meters. What is that creature? Wang Xian asked Emo Sherwu as he looked at the vague silhouette of a marine animal within the mist. Dragon King, that's the patrolling Yaksha. A creature that existed in mythology. Emo Sherwu looked ahead and continued. According to records, there were immortal islands in the past. Some of these immortal islands could move above the sea, some could hide themselves and some even had divine beasts guarding them. Patrolling Yaksha is a type of guardian beast in these records. They stationed themselves in a sea region and patrolled the surrounding waters. Their intelligence is extremely high and they possess horrifying strength. As Emo Sherwu spoke and looked at the patrolling Yaksha, his expression turned gloomy. Many patrolling Yakshas are surrounding this spiritual island. Their strength is horrifying. When they are in the seas, even inborn experts have to be careful. Moreover, based on my discovery, this island isn't ordinary. It could be moved. Although the movements aren't significant, there's no doubt that it could be shifted. Some experts estimate that this was a floating island. Floating island? Wang Xian was taken aback and revealed a shocked expression. Floating island? This wasn't an island that floats in the skies but on the surface of the seas. A stone would still sink when thrown into the sea. Yet, an island could actually float on the surface of the sea. That's truly magical. The entire island spanned several dozens of kilometers. A cruise sank after trying to enter the white mist but was wrecked by the patrolling Yakshas around the island. The number of patrolling Yakshas wouldn't be less than 30. Emo Sherwu continued his introduction of the island. What's the situation now? It's going to be nighttime soon. What are they waiting for? Wang Xian looked at the sky before turning to the 20-odd ships a short distance from him. Based on what an expert has said, when night falls, the surrounding white mist will disappear. Entering at night is far safer than trying to enter during the day. Emo Sherwu continued. When the moon rises and the white mist dissipates, all the ships will charge forward. At that time, occupying an area will be dependent on one's strength and luck. Wang Xian nodded his head slightly. He looked to the patrolling Yaksha and a thought struck him suddenly. When you receive my order in a while, enter the spiritual island immediately. I'll go handle the patrolling Yakshas, Wang Xian said to them. He removed the watch from his wrist and dived into the sea. Yes, young master. Bam! When Wang Xian dived into the sea, he noticed the members of the Dragon Palace were hiding in the depths of the sea. He turned to his left and looked over. He saw several human figures within the sea, and they were looking at the spiritual island. Huh, they must be water attribute cultivators, Wang Xian thought to himself. Therefore, he did not turn into a dragon immediately and instead swam deeper towards the bottom of the sea. When he reached a depth of approximately 110 meters, night had fallen. Below the surface it was completely dark. Looking down, one would feel that the seabed was within an abyss. However, day or night had no difference for Wang Xian considering his current strength. He swam and met up with the members of the Dragon Palace, after which, he stood on the Prime Minister Turtle. Greetings, Dragon King. The group of Dragon Palace members greeted him respectfully. Let's go. Wang Xian gestured for the Prime Minister Turtle to swim forward. Standing on the back of the Prime Minister Turtle, he looked at the spiritual island. Rumble. Prime Minister Turtle moved his huge body and swam slowly towards the seabed. Soon they entered the region that was previously shrouded in white mist. The moment he entered this region, Wang Xian instantly felt some marine animals staring at them. What horrifying senses! They discovered us the moment we entered this region. Wang Xian squinted his eyes and looked above him. From above, savage and fearsome patrolling yakshas charged towards them one after another. There were a total of 10 patrolling yakshas and the largest of them all was approximately 4 meters. One of their arms resembled powerful weapons and was even longer than their bodies. Water flowed rapidly past their bodies. Hoo! Scram! A cry sounded. From the cry, Wang Xian understood that they were asking him to scram. 10 patrolling yakshas stood in a row. Savageness gleamed in their eyes as they stared at Wang Xian and the group without fear. Patrolling yaksha. Level 9. Extractable dragon energy. 38,756. Patrolling yaksha. Level 10. Extractable dragon energy. 155,434. A level 10 and 9 level 9 patrolling yakshas. Wang Xian showed contempt on his face as he stood on the back of Prime Minister Turtle, looking down on the patrolling yakshas. Let us into the island or die. Rumble. As Wang Xian spoke, Prime Minister Turtle, Roving Heavens and other members of the Dragon Palace stared harshly at the patrolling yaksha ahead of them. From them, horrifying vibes started emanating. Everyone is forbidden from entering. The 10 patrolling yakshas did not back off. At this moment, one of the patrolling yakshas drew a conch out suddenly. Hoo! A faint but rapid voice sounded and propagated several kilometers through the sea. One could even hear it from the surface of the sea. What's that sound? On the sea surface, the crowd heard the rapid voices on their ships and were baffled. Look, the patrolling yakshas within the white mist have disappeared. They have dived into the sea. Patrolling yakshas are highly intelligent. Can it be that they knew we would be charging in and therefore are thinking of ambushing us? The crowd was doubtful and turned solemn. At this moment the moon had risen. Faint moonlight shrouded the sea surface, revealing the mysterious spiritual island gradually. With their enhanced sight as martial artists, they could vaguely see an exceptionally beautiful island bristling with life that was surfacing on the sea surface. All of their eyes were burning with thrill and desire. Nonetheless, they didn't dare to charge forward at this moment. At this very moment, approximately 100 patrolling yakshas had gathered in front of Wang Xian below the sea. At the forefront was a 6-meter-tall patrolling yaksha. His arms acted like powerful weapons. When he stood up, one could see he had a long fishtail. Water flowed above his arms as horrifying vibes were emitted from it. Get out of here or die. The powerful patrolling yaksha at the forefront glowered at Wang Xian and said. Wang Xian smiled and looked at the crowd of patrolling yakshas. Among them, there were 10 level 10 while the rest were level 9. Patrolling yakshas. Not bad. Wang Xian scanned across the 100 patrolling yakshas as he rubbed his chin. Based on mythology, patrolling yakshas were responsible for patrolling the vicinity of the Dragon Palace. Since the Dragon Palace was about to be built, these patrolling yakshas appeared at the right time, as they could become the patrolling guards for the Dragon Palace. No, when I build my Dragon Palace, they should be called Patrolling Dragon Sha. The name still sounds a little weird. Surrender or die. Chapter 313, Yaksha subdued, off to the spiritual island. As Wang Xian's voice blasted through the sea, an overwhelming aura of dragon power buried the crowd of yakshas beneath. Powerful forces from Roving Heavens, Prime Minister Turtle, Roving Girl, and Roving Lobster aided in the overwhelming aura. Scram or perish, the centermost yaksha warned. Waving its weapon-like arm, the yaksha carried forth a powerful surge of water and aimed it straight at Wang Xian and gang. The yaksha showed not the slightest fear towards them. Scram or perish, the yaksha warned again. In synchronized movements, the remaining yakshas and their leader aimed the weapons in their arms directly towards Wang Xian and gang. With actions so uniform they could pass off as an army. Good. Splendid. Wang Xian complimented. Admiring their discipline, he looked on at the yakshas with increasing satisfaction. As he did, he swung an arm and ordered, "Get a hold on them before subduing them all." "At your command, Dragon King," replied Roving Heavens along with the rest of the Dragon Palace members. With an electrifying aura, they lunged directly at the yakshas. Wang Xian had no regard for the yakshas, even with the presence of a level 11 expert amongst their group of 100. Based on the current abilities of the Dragon Palace members, the Devil Division led by Roving Heavens along with the 9 venomous sea snakes would suffice in wiping the yakshas out. "Intruders shall die," the yakshas roared once again in unison. With knife-like coordination, they attacked Roving Heavens and the gang head-on. "Ha!" The group of yakshas jeered as they swung their arm weapons at the same moment. A water swirl formed atop the forks on their arms and spiraled at frightening speeds. Virum! Roving Heavens let out a roar. With a baton in hand, he charged at the level 11 yaksha standing at the center in a bid to attack. Bam! Unfazed, the yaksha struck back at Roving Heavens head-on with his weapon-like arms. Ack 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 ack! Screeched the crowd of devil monkeys. As they maneuvered underwater, darting like bouts of devil shadows, they seized at the 100 or so yakshas. But the yakshas responded with neither panic nor confusion. Instead, they stood single file like experienced warriors and extended their arm-like weapons. Boom! A terrifying force from their weapons surged like massive currents and headed straight for the devil monkeys. They condensed the flows into a mass, and as the sea waters tumbled, a sea spear was formed. As it emerged, it struck at the devil monkeys like an impending crisis. Water Veil. Restore peace to the seas. A spirited voice commanded. It was Queen Clam. As she flapped the shells on her sides and swung her arms, streaks of blue water flow gathered in front of the devil monkeys. Her shell was slowly turning sapphire, and it appeared more translucent than before. "Let there be calm seas and fair winds," the 9 venomous sea snakes ordered. Rattling their tails, they opened their 9 mouths wide. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew amidst the ocean and surged towards the waves which were crashing toward the devil monkeys. Swoosh! Together, the water veil and powerful gale managed to combat the attacks by the yakshas. But even so, the facial expressions on the 100-odd yakshas remained constant. Under the leader's command, the yakshas initiated another attack, with the group changing stance in one swift movement. Brandishing their weapons and aided by a strong force from the waters, the yakshas charged forth at Roving Heavens and the devil monkeys. In one sweep the force glided through the seas. Like a giant halberd, it scoured through everything in its path. Such a powerful attack. To think that 100 yakshas can make defense this hard for the Devil Division, Wang Xian uttered in shock as he continued watching the 100-odd yakshas. The yakshas had attacked in a very synchronized manner. As they did, they induced the surrounding waters along to aid in attack. This heightened their terrifying prowess. With only a couple more level 10 experts than the Devil Division, the group of 100-odd yakshas had curbed the attack of the division which had a strength of 800. Had it not been for the help from Queen Clam and 9 venomous sea snakes, many devil monkeys would have been seriously injured from the attack earlier. "You have a death wish," Roving Heavens snarled. As he watched his suppressed juniors, he snapped in a grimace. Baring his fangs, his body lit up in appalling devil flames as he flung himself towards the yakshas. Roar! 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 The devil monkeys howled as the ferocity in them was ignited. Hair standing on end, they flashed their sharp claws and pounced along. Tsk tsk tsk. Hissed the 9 venomous sea snakes nearby, slithering with increasing speed as they did. Staring coldly at 9 level 10 yakshas with their eyes, they charged forth at them in a flash. With one leap, Roving Lobster joined in on the attack. Using both of its giant pincers, it snipped away at the yakshas. All manpower from the Dragon Palace was out in full force. In an instant, the surrounding seas cowered under the majestic awe of the divine dragon. Schools of fish nearby swam far away, scrambling for safety. As they cleared the area, the sea appeared all the more vast and deep, which added on to the spookiness. What's happening? Why are there bouts of terrifying forces surging from the sea? It's giving me the shudders. One shrieked. Such threatening force. What exactly is happening up front? Another quivered. Didn't they say that this is the historical site of a level 1 ancient sect? Why would there be waves of such terrifying forces otherwise? A third gulped. On the boats in surrounding waters, all people on board cast their glance towards the waters. With the horrendous force surging and the irregular waves, it set everyone out in fear and trepidation. On the deck of a large fishing vessel stood several elders. As they looked down at the seas, their eyes began to fill with dread. To think that a tidal wave had reversed in direction. This tremendous force is no doubt terrifying. As for the creature beneath, it must be from the Dan realm at the very least. The ocean, how appalling! An elder shook with a heavy look. What should we do then? Are we still vying for this spiritual island? Don't forget that this is an ancient first-class island we're looking at. Who knows, the spiritual medicine from its garden could even be on par with those from spiritual medicine gardens of the Saint class. Another elder reminded. With burning desire in his eyes he continued, what's more? Given that this is a first-class force, they're bound to possess treasure. In ancient times all the sects and clans were either located within famous mountains and rivers, or on peninsula islands. Idolized by all as the land of the sacred, an ancient first-class force is now on par with a current sacred sect. Hence we cannot give this spiritual island up. Just wait a while longer. Another elder concluded. Despite the apprehension owing to the force surging from the deep waters, no one was willing to give up in the face of such an alluring spiritual island. Waiting in silence, they were all bidding for their opportunity. Young master has given his orders. Charge! A voice shouted. Meanwhile, Mo Qinglong, Mo Yuan and Mo Shiwu were on a yacht when they heard the command. Hearts raced and the trio locked eyes for a split moment before glancing ahead. With one leap, they dashed for the spiritual island. Someone made their move, one shouted. Having a death wish. It's akin to courting doom. Such terrifying forces are coming from the seas. Yet they still dare to charge over. We'll see. They'll be killed by the marine creatures soon enough. A second mocked. It's Mo Shiwu and the gang he has called. This fellow fights pretty well, but it appears he's not very good with his intellect. The third commented. Just as well, someone to help us lead the way. Another bystander cheered. As the trio charged forward, the crowd looked on with astonishment, but continued nonetheless in anticipation. In moments, however, they were met with surprise and bewilderment as their faces dimmed. They managed faintly. With racing speed, the trio flew inside the island parameters, eventually landing on the island without the slightest impediment. Chapter 314. The spiritual island that was overrun by monster. They got in. They actually got in. How can this be? Where are the patrolling yakshas? Why didn't the guarding animals under the sea surface appear? This is bad. Now that 3 men have entered, should we follow them in? At this moment, the 3 other forces that had gathered in the vicinity were stuck in a dilemma. 3 men had charged towards the spiritual island. In the end, they were able to get in easily without any obstruction. This embarrassed the other 3 forces. These 3 forces were all first-class forces. They were lay family from Modu, wind god sect from Dafeng Mountain and Water Separation Island from the Sea Islands. When they saw Mo Qinglong and the other 2 men enter the spiritual island, they were bitter and furious. We can't continue to wait like this. Otherwise, all the good stuff will be taken away by those 3 people. We have to get through too. On a huge fishing boat, several old men's eyes shimmered. In that case, who will test it out first? Another old man seemed conflicted. He looked down at the sea surface and still felt heart-wrenching powers from the bottom of the sea. Since the three of them got through without any trouble, we shouldn't be in danger either. Elders, we can first test it out with a yacht. If the yacht isn't wrecked, we will not be in any danger, said a middle-aged man while frowning. Under such circumstances, no one had the guts to charge forward despite seeing others entering the spiritual island. Try it out immediately, the old man from Lei family ordered. Subsequently, a yacht charged towards the spiritual island. When the other two forces saw it, they frowned. They were also waiting. Once their safety could be verified, they would charge ahead immediately. Charge! When the yacht reached the spiritual island, the surrounding crowd could no longer hold back their urge as they charged rapidly towards the spiritual island. In an instant, a few hundred men flew over directly. At this very moment, Mo Qinglong, Mo Yuan and Mo Shiwu, who had entered the spiritual island first, were carefully observing the ruins of an ancient sect. All of them were shocked. White flowers were grown around the entire spiritual island, and these flowers were producing a faint mist. The surrounding white mist had all originated from these flowers. The entire spiritual island was beautiful. However, weeds had overrun some places as no humans had lived on it for a long time. On a stone path, Mo Qinglong, Mo Yuan and Mo Shiwu looked in shock at what was before them. A footprint. It was a huge footprint that was approximately 4 meters long, and was deeply imprinted on the ground. What kind of animal would have left this footprint? How can it be so horrifying? Mo Qinglong and the group looked ahead and discovered other huge footprints that were all around the entire spiritual island. Around the footprints were several sets of human remains. Some had decomposed, leaving only bones behind. Many of these bones had cracked. It was clear that this was caused by huge physical impacts. Can it be that this spiritual island on the sea encountered an attack by terrifying animals in the sea, leading to the annihilation of the entire sect? The three of them were baffled. They looked to the side and found several collapsed brick houses around them. Some were even more than 50% destroyed. It was clear that these houses were knocked down by a terrifying animal. Mo Qinglong and the group turned their attention ahead. In the middle of the island there was a huge training ground. Before the training ground was a row of buildings. These buildings were 15 to 16 meters tall. However, even the tops of these buildings had large holes. Who would have expected the entire spiritual island to actually be wrecked by a horrifying animal in the sea? Mo Qinglong was shocked. He moved and approached the central region of the island rapidly. Based on common understanding, the central location was where most treasures were kept. Moreover, spiritual medicine gardens would typically be placed in the central region. Split up and search for treasures. Mo Qinglong instructed Mo Yuan and Mo Shiwu before diving towards a building. No one knew how long ago the sect on the spiritual island had been annihilated. All the buildings had clear signs of weathering. When they entered the room, they immediately started searching it. This is a depository of books. All the books here are really precious and valuable. Mo Qinglong scanned across the room, after which he headed for another room. A depository of books wasn't particularly useful for them. This must be the accommodation of the higher management of the sect. Mo Qinglong entered another room. After looking around, he immediately started searching the room. At this moment, Mo Yuan shouted, "Master, the spiritual medicine garden is here." Mo Qinglong moved and charged over immediately. Spiritual medicine gardens typically contain the most precious resources of a sect. The spiritual medicine garden was located at the back. At that place there was a pond that spanned approximately a dozen mu. Within the pond and around the pond, various spiritual medicines were planted. Beside the spiritual medicine garden were several sets of remains. There were 4 huge footprints in the spiritual medicine garden. A substantial number of spiritual grasses were dead, but there were still several hundred tufts of spiritual grass that were still emitting spiritual energy. It was especially so for the huge lotus flower in the middle of the pond. The lotus flower was the size of a basin. Amidst the darkness of the night, It was still glowing in white light. The middle of the lotus flower was an entirely white lotus seed pod with countless lotus seeds in it. One could easily tell that the lotus flower, lotus seed pod and lotus seeds weren't ordinary. Mo Qinglong looked across the spiritual medicine garden and his eyes lit up. Plucking these spiritual medicines away will be a waste. The best option is to let them continue growing here before plucking their fruits. Mo Qinglong looked around him. The most precious of them all should be the white lotus flower in the middle of the pond and a spiritual tree beside it. That spiritual tree had already reached a height of 6 to 7 meters. Based on Mo Qinglong's understanding, this spiritual tree was known as green fruit tree. This spiritual tree should have reached level 5 or 6. Therefore, it shouldn't be called a spiritual medicine but a spiritual tree instead. Other than that, there were at least 50 to 60 tufts of level 4 and 5 spiritual grass and over 100 tufts of level 3 and below spiritual grass. Perhaps it was because this spiritual island had been deserted for 5 to 600 years or for an even longer time. With no one harvesting these spiritual grasses, there were a lot of them around. The value of these spiritual grasses alone is astronomical. Mo Qinglong and the group thought to themselves, I found it first. Get lost. I held it in my hands first. Scram or I'll kill you. Do you think my Lei family is afraid of your water separation island? At this moment, noises came from behind them. Several hundred people from Water Separation Island, Lei family, and the Wind God sect had dashed over. The quiet spiritual island became raucous instantly. Although they were shocked by the humongous footprints that were left behind, they were getting frenzied over the treasures they were seeing. The spiritual medicine garden is here. At this moment a few young men dashed over. Seeing the spiritual grass in front of Mo Qinglong and the group, they were thrilled. Chapter 315 Joining Forces. The spiritual medicine garden is here. A voice boomed. As it sounded across the entire spiritual island, all bickering and commotion elsewhere came to a standstill. In an instant figures could be seen darting over at electrifying speeds. Across the sky 9 inborn experts soared through the air. When they saw the various treasures in the spiritual medicine garden, their eyes blazed with desire. With a shrug, they hopped onto the fringes of the garden. A level 6 spiritual medicine, goodness. To think it's the level 6 White Valley Lotus. Aha! A ripe White Valley Lotus. One exclaimed in elation. A green fruit tree. Such a level 6 tree can produce 6 level 5 spiritual fruits in a year, while the overripened fruits have fallen and turned into compost. Another said excitedly. Dozens of level 5 spiritual grasses, and plenty more of those of level 3 to 4. A third cheered. A crazed look swept across the 9 inborn experts. As they scanned their surroundings, their cold stares were overcome by burning desire at the sight of the spiritual medicine aplenty. Should they be able to obtain these spiritual medicine, it would no doubt double the prowess of their clans right away. What's more, they may even attain sacred sect status given long-term cultivation of this entire plot, but only if they could possess it. This was especially so, as the spiritual island happened to be a rare floating island. This meant that the island was able to move along the ocean, making it an ideal spiritual land. In addition, there were white flowers growing along the perimeters which emitted a misty fog. Aside from camouflaging effects, the flora could also help gather spiritual energy. Amidst the oceans, this piece of land was surrounded by unpolluted air. Hence its concentration of spiritual energy definitely outweighed those from the cities. The inborn experts pondered as their eyes twinkled. Meanwhile, disciples of the various forces gathered behind their clan experts, keeping a vigilant watch over the surroundings. In the brief fight earlier, some of these disciples had already sustained injuries. To compete based on merits, a middle-aged elder asked blandly. With a glum face, he cast his glance towards the 6 inborn experts from the Lei family and Water Separation Island. To which the inborn experts kept mum, as they continued eyeing each other in order to assess one another's abilities. The strengths of the Lei family, Water Separation Island, and Wind God sect were neck and neck. This time around, each of them was represented by 3 inborn experts. Perhaps variations existed between individual inborn experts. Yet, should they really start fighting, the outcome remained to be seen. But one thing was certain: some of them would perish. The 9 inborn experts continued to observe each other, and in an instant tension filled the atmosphere. Meanwhile, the disciples crowding behind gripped their weapons with a heavy look. A fight could break out any moment now. I don't think it would do any of us any good should we start battling it out now. Unless any of you are confident in annihilating the other party. Otherwise, it's bad news to all, even if only one should escape. An elder from Water Separation Island chipped in as he surveyed the 6 inborn experts. When the 3 leveled forces really started fighting, it would not be surprising should they end up with a Pyrrhic victory. Whereas if only one party should win marginally, and should information about the spiritual island be divulged, then they would be bound to be attacked by other sects and clans. Who knows, they may even face being seized by sacred sects. All this for one floating island, given its high value. In fact, it was so superior it could make a good sect ground. Giving thought to his analysis, the inborn experts from the Lay family and Wind God sect agreed with the elder from Water Separation Island. An equal division then? An elder from the Lay family asked as he squinted, testing the reaction of others. How are we going to do that? This floating island is one huge gem. Smiling, the elder from Water Separation Island replied, How about this? We from the Water Separation Island will take the floating island alone, while you can have everything else. Wishful thinking, an elder from the Lay family snapped. The worth of the entire floating island was no less than the spiritual medicine garden, the secret manual it held, and the like combined. Just then, the elder from Water Separation Island who spoke earlier uttered, Ever thought of establishing a saint-class force? As he finished, the inborn experts from Wind God sect and Lay family could not help but flinch. They took one look at the crowd around them before turning towards the spiritual grass which was nestled in the garden, and breathed somewhat heavily. Should the 3 parties join forces and give it a little more than a decade, they could really end up setting a saint-class force for all we know. A sacred sect. One immensely massive entity. But to have 3 forces coming together to set up one sacred sect is a huge matter. Where interests are complicated and stakes are high. It would take days to sort everything out. What we'll have to do now is to hide this spiritual island. To keep it away from the other forces. As for its allocation, the 3 forces shall discuss it thereafter. An elder from the Lay family suggested steadily. All right. One nodded. Agreed. Another seconded the thought. Instead of fighting and vying ourselves to our deaths, we might as well join forces. The 9 inborn experts laughed. To them this was the best choice possible. Gentlemen, it appears that you've yet to ask for our take, Mo Qinglong interrupted. He was with Mo Yuan and Mo Sherwu meanwhile. As he spoke, the trio frowned and scanned the crowd. Haha. Oops, we've forgotten about the few outsiders. An elder joked as he surveyed the trio. Outsiders? We made a pact back then. To inform the forces that joined later, and split the share of this spiritual island. Mo Sherwu rebuked while peering at a few young men from the 3 forces. True enough. We've indeed made a pact. To vie for the treasures based on our own merits. A voice argued. That's right. And the treasures are right here. Take them with you if you've got what it takes. Another challenged. Haha. Mo Sherwu, if you've got what it takes, you may take all the treasures here with you right away. But if you don't, A third gloated. Thereafter, several young men from each of the 3 forces stepped out and smirked as they eyed Mo Sherwu. Show us what you've got. Otherwise, you're not fit to get an equal share of the treasures as us. A young man provoked once again, this time annoying Mo Sherwu. You ingrates. Had I not rescued the few of you at the start, you fellows would have died at the hands of the Yakshas long ago. Mo Sherwu snapped as he glared at them. Humph, weren't you also protecting yourself by saving us? Don't take the moral high ground. A young man criticized as he stared right back. Folks, how would you suggest we handle these 3? An elder of the Lay family asked the inborn experts sarcastically. Vying for the treasures with us leaves us with no choice but to strike. An elder announced as he stepped forward with a faint grin. Gradually, 3 experts from the Lei family and Water Separation Island began to follow suit. They had their eyes fixed on Emo Qinglong and gang with a deathly stare. To which, Emo Qinglong and the gang responded with a burdened look. Chapter 316. The Roar of the Devil Monkey. On the spiritual island, one inborn expert from Lei family, Water Separation Island and Wind God sect respectively stepped forward and looked at Emo Qinglong, Emo Yuan and Emo Sherwu with contempt. They walked over slowly with their weapons in their hands, glowing in a chilling light. You guys must be courting death. Emo Qinglong's eyes were filled with killing intent as he stared at the 3 inborn experts walking towards them. Devilish aura started circling around his body. Emo Yuan transformed his fingers into claws and stared at the approaching group harshly. Hehe. Devilish cultivators. It seems like we are going to eradicate devils for the benefit of the world. An old man turned solemn after noticing the dense devilish aura being emitted from their bodies. Kill the 3 of them, an old man shouted. Subsequently, he jumped ahead and charged towards Emo Qinglong, Emo Yuan and Emo Sherwu. The 3 inborn experts reached Emo Qinglong and the group in an instant. The stifling pressure of an inborn expert was mixed with their dense killing intent. The 3 inborn experts had no plans to hide their aura and killing intent at all. Oh! At this moment, Wang Xian, who was on the seabed, did not know about the intense battle that was going on at the spiritual island. Wang Xian smiled faintly and looked ahead. In front of him, 100 patrolling yakshas were pinned down on the floor with grave injuries under the attacks from the Devil Division, 9 venomous sea snakes, roving lobster and roving girl. Surrender to me or die. Wang Xian stood on the back of Prime Minister Turtle, shrouded his dragon power towards all the patrolling yakshas and spoke coldly. I surrender. The leader of the patrolling yakshas looked at Wang Xian and the group in horror. Gradually he lifted his head. Great. This will be the wisest choice you make in your lifetime. The Dragon Palace shall be separated into 9 divisions in the future. The Devil Division has since been established. Today, I shall confer on you, leader of patrolling yakshas, as the Dragon Guard Division. You shall patrol the 4 seas and guard the Dragon Palace. I shall also bestow upon you the name of roving yaksha. As Wang Xian spoke, he waved his hands. Drops of essence blood entered the patrolling yakshas' heads as Wang Xian smiled. Devil Division was the main battle strength against the enemies. As for the Dragon Guard Division, they would be responsible for patrolling the surroundings of the Dragon Palace and protecting it. Although there were only 100 patrolling yakshas, the strength and battle prowess they demonstrated when they worked together were incomparably horrifying. Moreover, they could move extremely fast in the water. Even Wang Xian was astonished at their speed. In water, they possessed a speed that even the 9 venomous sea snakes couldn't match. However, if the 9 venomous sea snakes were above the sea surface, their speed would be a lot faster than it was in the seas. Thank you, Dragon King. Greetings, Dragon King. The leader of the patrolling yakshas bowed down in a unique manner as he remarked. Greetings, Dragon King. The surrounding patrolling yaksha followed, kneeling down respectfully as they remarked. This is the cultivation art for the water divine dragon. Cultivate diligently in the future. A thought was sent into their minds. Subsequently, Wang Xian looked at the floating island. Bring me to the bottom of the floating island to take a look. Wang Xian said to roving yaksha immediately. Yes, Dragon King. After absorbing the essence blood of the divine dragon, a flash of energy beamed from the eyes of the roving yaksha. The speed of water flowing on his body became even quicker. Dragon King, this is our old nest. We have been living under this island. After arriving at the side of the island, the roving yaksha pointed to the bottom of the island. Wang Xian looked across inquisitively. The base of the floating island wasn't connected to the seabed. Moreover, a type of plant was growing on the bottom of the island. This plant was black in color, similar to the color of the patrolling yakshas. They were densely packed and covered the entire bottom of the floating island. Moreover, this type of plant wasn't just a layer. Instead, there were several layers of them which formed empty spaces each layer. Wang Xian was surprised to see a 1-meter-tall yaksha moving within these spaces. This is our nest and also our food. Roving Yaksha swam over, scraped a part of the plant using his weapon-like arm and handed it to Wang Xian. Wang Xian received it and realized it had strong buoyancy. So this plant is the reason why the island floats and can even move. Wang Xian was in awe of the mysterious things of the seas. There were all kinds of strange animals in the sea. If I convert this island to my accommodation, wouldn't it be? Wang Xian's eyes lit up. He just had to modify this floating island a little to convert it to a mobile base. In fact, he could even pull this floating island to the Bohai Sea. If he wished to go to other areas, he could also shift it to the Pacific Ocean or the Indian Ocean. A mobile fortress and base. Wang Xian's eyes burned with enthusiasm. You guys wait for me here. I'm going to take a look at the spiritual island. After finishing his words, Wang Xian moved and swam towards the spiritual island. As the ruins of an ancient sect, there should be lots of treasures on it. Moreover, he had informed Mo Qinglong and the group to search for treasures while he was under the water. Wang Xian believed they would have obtained lots of spiritual treasures by now. The rewards this time are indeed handsome. Wang Xian revealed a faint smile and arrived on the spiritual island. Rumble. Keske. How dare you guys injure our lay family's people? Trying to grab these spiritual medicines and spiritual treasures with just the three of you? You guys must be courting death. However, he heard a furious roar that propagated through the entire spiritual island the moment he landed on shore. After which, the sounds of collision erupted. Wang Xian squinted his eyes and his expression turned cold. Cough cough. All of you shall die. A weak voice sounded. It was the voice of Mo Qinglong. Haha. Kill us? We will kill you right now. A brazen voice sounded once again. Still thinking of getting the treasures? Wishful thinking. Even if you were a pinnacle inborn expert, we would still kill you. It seems like someone can't wait to die. Murderous intent gleamed in Wang Xian's eyes. Based on what Mo Sherwu had said, all treasures found should be obtained through their respective strengths. This was the agreement for the split of treasures on the spiritual island. In Wang Xian's opinion, no one in the three forces would be a match for Mo Qinglong or Mo Yuan. Based on the voice of Mo Qinglong, he was clearly injured now. In that case, there was only one possibility. A group of people had attacked them together. Rumble. Wang Xian tapped lightly on the water surface. Roving Heavens immediately raised his head above the surface. Follow me. Roving Heavens gave his orders before jumping onto the shore of the spiritual island. Below him, 800 devil monkeys followed closely behind. They were like savage beasts from the bottom of the water as they surfaced from the seas. Every single one of them had an intense devilish flame emitting from their body. Roar! Roving Heavens walked beside Wang Xian and let out a cry. With his 6-meter-tall figure, he was a towering figure beside Wang Xian. He held a golden rod in his hand. Behind him, 800 devil monkeys jumped onto the shores of the spiritual island. The horrifying auras from them masked the moon in the sky. Let's go. Wang Xian stood up gradually. The group of devil monkeys spread out before charging forward rapidly with Wang Xian. Gur gur gur. As the devil monkeys growled, the entire spiritual island trembled. Chapter 317. By merits. Gur gur gur. The devil monkeys growled. The entire spiritual island trembled as their voices blasted through the air. Wang Xian narrowed his eyes briefly as he headed towards the center of the spiritual island. With him was Roving Heavens. With a wooden rod measuring 5 to 6 meters resting on his shoulders, he followed alongside Wang Xian with a ferocious look. What's that noise? A voice quivered. Just then, inborn experts from the Lei family, Water Separation Island, and Wind God sect were at the spiritual medicine garden, when they heard the growling of the devil monkeys. To which, their faces winced as they darted their eyes around hastily. Seems like animals growling and in large numbers, one panicked. Don't tell me monsters have ascended on Spiritual Island? The second guessed. That can't be. How could sea monsters get on the island? They must be growling in the waters, but do not approach. Another reassured. Those hair-raising footprints on the island, could they have come from the same monster? A voice asked. As it was nighttime, other than the casting of faint moonlight, they were surrounded by pitch dark on this lone island in the middle of the sea. Peering into the distance around them, it felt like they were situated amidst an abyss. Given such circumstances, disciples of the three forces could not help but shiver. Especially with the growling earlier. The way it sounded and felt had petrified them all the more. "Something's approaching," an inborn expert cried out, jerking his head to the right while doing so. "Many of them," another inborn expert added as he turned right as well. "What?" the rest of the disciples behind exclaimed. Taking one deep gulp, they too looked in the same direction in utter panic. They were not being timid. Instead, having witnessed the yakshas around the spiritual island, along with the alarming footprints inland, it became too overwhelming. They were already in fear of the creatures out at sea. "Haha. Like I've said, all of you shall die. All of you." Voices laughed. It was Mo Qinglong, Mo Yuan and Mo Sherwu who were lying at a side, resting. They shot up excitedly upon hearing the growls. Bearing with their physical pains the best they could, they swept their glance coldly across the three forces ahead. "Shut up," an inborn expert snapped as he eyed the trio. With the swing of an arm, he blasted a bout of energy towards the trio. Bam bam! The energy struck directly at Mo Qinglong and gang, which sent them flying 7 to 8 meters back, before crashing on the floor. Had it not been for their strong constitution, they would have long been killed by the blows. "Who are you trying to scare? Fear not, even if the sea creatures should ascend on the island. Their combat abilities would diminish greatly," an inborn expert assured. As he did, he raised his long sword, which was flickering with laser lights. Inhaling deeply, the disciples crowding around clutched onto their weapons. Gurgur! As faint, deep growls which sounded like panting approached closer by the second, they sent a faint tremor across the grounds. Several hundred from the three forces gazed intently at the area ahead. "Boom boom boom. It has appeared," someone announced. "It's coming," another yelled. With a murderous demeanor, all men from the three forces braced themselves. They looked ahead at the shadows which were gradually emerging. Swish! Waving an arm, an inborn expert lit up the sky ahead with a blinding flame. Boom! The flame also revealed what was in front of them. At the sight of the figures ahead, everyone stared with eyes wide in shock. Under the bright lights, a group of creepy but human-like creatures emerged from about 500 meters ahead. They were moving towards the crowd, slowly and steadily. They were mammoth-like in size, reaching beyond 2 meters in height, with the tallest standing at almost 6 meters. They were also surrounded by balls of black gases winding around their bodies. What are those?" an inborn expert muttered in a low voice, as he looked ahead with a cringing face. There were too many of these black human-like creatures, so much so that they had way overnumbered the crowd of disciples. "Some of them look like monkeys," an inborn expert commented. While he squinted at the creatures for a closer look, he gripped his weapon more tightly. "Fear not. They're just creatures similar to the water monkeys," an inborn expert from the Lei family signaled to the disciples behind. As the two sides were closing in at about 200 meters, Wang Xian could see Mo Qinglong and gang lying by the side. "Who is it? Who gave you the audacity to attack my men?" Wang Xian asked the group of three forces as he eyed them indifferently. Surprised by the noise, the crowd immediately threw their gaze over in Wang Xian's direction. "Huh, there's someone in there?" a voice questioned. "To think there's someone across who's controlling the group of creatures?" another asked. Only the unknown would be feared. They were actually more relieved than not, when they realized that the group of creatures was under the control of a human. An inborn expert from the Lei family swept his gaze past the group of devil monkeys. With eyes narrowed, he tightened his fists. "Brother, this is Elder Lei here. I think there must be some misunderstanding between us. I seek your understanding, should we have offended you in any way," the elder said to Wang Xian. "I'm asking you, who gave you guys the courage to attack my men?" Wang Xian questioned again, ignoring Elder Lei, this time in an eerily low pitch. With a change of stance, 3 devil monkeys scrambled over to Mo Qinglong and gang, and lifted them off the ground. Young master, the three forces here have made an alliance. They challenged us to take the things here away, based on merits. Mo Qinglong reported to Wang Xian with a pale face. Wang Xian nodded in acknowledgement. This was followed by a powerful bout of the Azure Dragon's energy which was channeled into the trio's bodies, healing them as it went. By merits, huh? If that's the case, we'll go by merits then. Wang Xian concluded. He looked casually at the three forces as he nodded, and continued, if that's the case, we'll play by your rules. Huh? The crowd from the three forces frowned. An elder from Water Separation Island contemplated. While his facial expression changed in tandem with his thoughts, he trailed off, brother, you possess strong powers, so you're qualified to a share of the spiritual treasures on this island. That's right, we're willing to share the spiritual treasures here with you, another added. We acknowledge your powers, so that makes you qualified, a few elders patronized. But you guys are not. Wang Xian cut them off even before they could end their sentences. With that, he ordered swiftly, kill them. Ak. Just as Wang Xian concluded his sentence, Roving Heavens lifted his head and roared towards the sky. The long rod which rested on his shoulders crashed onto the ground. Boom! With a low rumble, Roving Heavens stared ahead with its eyes bloodshot. Slowly but steadily, it uttered in human language, kill. Kill. All around, the devil monkeys complemented loud growls, followed by a gust of demonic aura purging out of their bodies. Boom! As they transformed into numerous black shadows, they swooped straight at the hundreds from the three forces. Chapter 318 Zhanlu and Hao Zhong. What horrifying vibes! They are so powerful. When Roving Heavens led his devil division in the charge, the 8 inborn experts and the injured old inborn expert were shocked. The violent aura sent chills down their spines. Behind them, the disciples of the three forces trembled. Looking at the devil monkeys that were charging towards them, they felt as though they were facing a 10,000-strong army. Shit! They have multiple inborn realm existences among them. The inborn experts were shocked and felt fear grip them. Kill! An inborn expert gritted his teeth and swung the long sword he was holding upward. The glow of the sword spanned several meters and clashed towards Roving Heavens, who was at the front of the pack. Bam! Roving Heavens smashed his long metal rod towards that inborn expert domineeringly. The rod and longsword clashed. However, it was an exercise in futility, as the horrifying strength of Roving Heavens instantly broke the longsword in the hand of the inborn expert. Rumble! That inborn expert also exploded into pieces without putting up much resistance. What? How can this be possible? Seeing their companions being crushed into pieces, the group of inborn experts were petrified. How horrifying! Behind them, the crowd of disciples had witnessed what had just happened. None of them could help but shiver and take steps back. Roar! However, the group of devil monkeys charged into the crowd of the three forces. Art! Soon incessant cries sounded. Without putting up much resistance, they were completely crushed. Some of these inborn experts retreated in fear. Seeing how Roving Heavens killed several inborn experts with a single strike each, they were desolated. No! Don't kill me! Please! Don't kill me! Shouted a desperate inborn expert. Just like what you have done, this is the consequences of being weak. Wang Xian glanced coldly across them and remarked emotionlessly. Since they had established these rules, they should follow them even if the rules led to their death. Roar! Roving Heavens jumped and charged ahead of the group of inborn experts in a horrifying manner. Crushing! Soon cries started going quiet. Wang Xian looked around him. Young master! At this moment, Mo Qinglong, Mo Yuan and Mo Shiwu, who were recuperating, had recovered. They walked deferentially to Wang Xian and explained, "This is the spiritual medicine garden on the spiritual island. There are 2 level 6 spiritual medicines in it. One of them is White Valley Lotus and the other is Green Fruit Tree." Mo Qinglong pointed at the 2 spiritual medicines while looking towards the buildings behind. "We have not searched the buildings. However, I believe there will definitely be lots of spiritual treasure in them. Let's go take a look." Wang Xian looked gleefully at the garden of spiritual medicine and grass. 2 level 6 spiritual medicines were more than what the Sui family had. As for the remaining level 4 and 5 spiritual grass and medicine, Wang Xian was just a little worse off than the Sui family. I'll be able to refine lots of elixir pills from these spiritual medicine and grass. At that time, I'll sell them in exchange for resources for the Dragon Palace. I should be able to gather most of the required resources. Wang Xian thought to himself. After a quick walk around the spiritual medicine garden, he headed towards the row of buildings behind it. Ka. When they entered the first room, the decayed wooden door fell to the ground instantly. Wang Xian looked around the room before pulling out different drawers enthusiastically as though he was on a treasure hunt. This is a bottle for elixir pills? Wang Xian picked up a porcelain bottle. After opening it, he found that the elixir pills in it had already become scraps. He shook his head slightly and continued his search. Within the rooms, there were all kinds of weapons and jewelry made of jade. Wang Xian even found 2 hairpins made from top-tier jade. As they combed through the different rooms, Wang Xian and the group found a substantial amount of precious treasures. Young master, there's an entrance leading underground here. At this moment, Mo Qinglong spoke to Wang Xian. Leading underground? Wang Xian's eyes lit up. He looked over and saw stairs leading underground, which he walked down immediately. This is the treasure room of the sect. When Wang Xian entered, he immediately saw various exquisite weapons and precious antiques. His eyes lit up instantly. There were paintings and calligraphy pieces hung on the walls. However, they had decayed and were thus valueless. Looking ahead, Wang Xian saw a sword hung on the wall. Below it, there was a zither on the table and a box made of jade. The 3 items were in a prominent position in the treasure room. Clearly, they were also the 3 most precious objects in this treasure room. Wang Xian's attention fell on the treasured sword hung on the wall. Just as Wang Xian contacted it, the treasured sword seemed to tremble. This gave Wang Xian a shock. He held the sword scabbard tightly. The entire sword was over 100 kilograms. For a long sword, this was really heavy. Wang Xian's eyes burned fervently. Holding the hilt of the sword lightly, he drew it out slowly. A crisp voice sounded. A dazzling gold light shimmered and the sharpness of the sword made Wang Xian's arm tremble a little. Great sword! What a sharp sword! Wang Xian stared at the long sword. Suddenly, a message appeared in his mind. Zhanlu level 10. Spiritual sword. This is a spiritual sword. Zhanlu. Oh gosh. This is Zhanlu. Wang Xian was shocked and thrilled. Zhanlu was one of the 10 famed swords and regarded as the best among the 5 unparalleled famed swords. It was said that it was forged over 3 years using the best metal and within a cold spring. I had not expected this to be Zhanlu, one of the 10 famed swords in history. This historic sword was forged by Oyezi. In that case, Oyezi must be a grandmaster blacksmith. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to forge a famed sword classified as one of the 10 famed swords. Wang drew the famed sword out of its scabbard completely. The bronze shade and the sharp aura around it were dazzling. Wang Xian moved his arm and injected metal attribute energy into it. Instantly, a sharp glow covered the sword. From a far place, one could already sense the sharpness of the sword. Great! Zhanlu is known to be the sword of benevolence or the sword of the king. I can use this. Wang Xian laughed and put the sword aside. After which, he looked to the zither below it. A zither that could be placed with Zhanlu would definitely not be ordinary. How zhong? The zither was made of wood. However, Wang Xian noticed that the wood showed no signs of decay despite the passing of a few hundreds of years. Moreover, it looked just like a new zither. Wang Xian moved slightly and the information on the zither appeared in his mind too. Haozhong level 10. It's another level 10 spiritual object. This zither wasn't simple but Wang Xian had no use for it and didn't know how to use it. Looking at this extremely stunning zither, Wang Xian picked it up to take a closer look. There's another long sword below the zither. Enchantment sword? It seems like the sword and the zither come in a set. This sword is level 9? What a great treasure! Chapter 319, The Wood Dragon Ball. Wang Xian was pleasantly surprised by the two spiritual treasures, namely the ancient sword of Zhanlu and the zither of Hao Zhong. Wang Xian had no use for the zither. On the other hand, he was very fond of the sword. He was not versed in swordplay. Nonetheless, the childhood dream of venturing the world and helping the underprivileged as a chivalrous swordsman remained rooted at the back of his mind. Knights looked suave as they wielded their long swords, their main choice of weapon. Swish, attack at lightning speed. Swash, take the counterstrike. Wang Xian grinned as he roleplayed with the sword, before his sight landed on the remaining jade box. A container carved out of emerald. Just the container alone is worth hundreds of millions. Wang Xian exclaimed as he picked it up for assessment. It was not particularly heavy, glowing in emerald green translucence. It looked incredibly invaluable. What's this? Wang Xian quizzed. As he opened the container, he was stunned at the sight of a jade green orb. A message flashed across his mind. Golden Rain Tree with Spiritual Bead. Level 10. Spiritual Bead of the Golden Rain Wood. A level 10 with Spiritual Bead. Wang Xian exclaimed with an astounded look. Wang Xian had come across many spiritual beads. For instance, the two spiritual flame balls of the Sui family, the two spiritual beads which he received from Flame Palace and Fire God denomination, as well as the ones which he had obtained right from the beginning. But this was the first time in which he came across a spiritual bead of another element. I can totally refine this level 10 spiritual bead and transform it into a Dragon Ball. A wood element Dragon Ball. Wang Xian uttered to himself. Picking it up gently, Wang made a light swirl of the spiritual bead on his palm. Drops of his essence blood seeped into the bead as it brimmed with life. Soon after, he opened his mouth and absorbed the spiritual bead into his body. Given the nourishment from his dragon energy, the wood element spiritual bead would transform into a wood Dragon Ball, which would also possess incredible powers. Furthermore, a wood Dragon Ball is able to improve land air ability. By placing it on a spiritual medicine garden, it would greatly boost the growth of spiritual medicine within the area. A huge profit we've made this time. Wang Xian cheered as he admired the ancient sword of Zhanlu, wood element spiritual beads, along with other spiritual medicine and treasures of the like. This included the invaluable floating island. To him these were priceless treasures. Thereafter, he flipped through the treasure trove once more, but could no longer find anything more valuable than the things which he had on hand. Wang Xian exited the treasure trove and continued searching in the neighboring rooms. As they came to a room within one of the central grand halls, Wang Xian and gang discovered the name of the sect which had settled on this spiritual island. The island was named Wood Mirage, eponymous to the sect which had settled on it. Stone tablets lined the rooms of the grand halls. Based on records carved on one of them, it stated that there were more than 2,000 disciples on this Wood Mirage Island. Amongst them was a Lao Zu, who had attained abilities of the Dan realm. An ancient first-class sect would be on par with a current sacred sect, Wang Xian said, trailing off. He sighed as he looked at information on the stone tablet. While making his way out, he was surprised by the giant footprint ahead which measured close to 4 meters. A footprint up to 4 meters in length. The monster with this footprint must tower over 20 meters in height. It's enough to topple houses hovering at 16 meters, Wang Xian thought to himself as he assessed the extent of the damage around him. It was no surprise for a monster of over 20 meters in length to exist within the oceans. After all, the blue whale measured more than 30 meters, while a sperm whale could reach over 20 meters. And these were known mammoths on Earth, so it only meant that there were still many out there which were yet to be discovered. While a blue whale may be gigantic, its combat abilities were much weaker, which made it an ordinary species. Dawn had arrived by the time Wang Xian completed his tour around the island. As he arrived at the sea, deep in thought, he was immediately received by Roving Yuxia. Dragon King, Roving Yuxia greeted. How do we go about moving this island? What's the fastest speed at which it could move? Wang Xian asked Roving Yuxia in response. Now that he owned the island, Wang Xian was preparing to put the island through a series of refurbishments. Turning the entire island into his ideal wonderland, for some future fun, seemed like a good choice. In this way, there was no future need for cruise ships, for he could simply ride on the island. That sounded really cool just by the mere thought of it. Dragon King, moving the island requires aid from an external force. This can either be a powerful source of wind or tidal energy, or physical strength, roving Yaksha explained. He continued, the island isn't too heavy, given that it's currently floating on the sea. Even we Yakshas are able to move it. That said, our moving speed will be very slow, as we can only shift it between the time of sunrise to sunset. Hence the distance moved will not be significant. He ended. Nodding in acknowledgement, Wang Xian gave a faint smile. So long as the island can be shifted quickly, he thought. There were only 100 Yakshas. But, with the addition of the devil monkeys, Prime Minister Turtle and gang, it would definitely speed up the rate at which the island was shifted. Prime Minister Turtle! Wang Xian called out, to which the former immediately moved over. Bowing his head, Prime Minister Turtle swam over to meet Wang Xian. Subject here at your command. Prime Minister Turtle greeted. Bring roving heavens and the rest along. We'll shift this island over to the one where the past dragon sect base stood. Wang Xian ordered Prime Minister Turtle. It would be good camouflage to have the island shifted over, which would make it easier for Wang Xian to order its refurbishment thereafter. Yes, Dragon King. Prime Minister Turtle nodded. Following which, he gathered all the Dragon Palace members to set off immediately, as they prepared to shift the floating island over to the Bohai Sea. Wang Xian assessed the speed at which the island was shifting. He was very pleased even though it was moving at less than half the speed of a speedboat. As the Dragon Palace welcomed more members, or with rising abilities of their manpower, moving the floating island would also become much faster. To the extent where one day, perhaps Prime Minister and Roving Girl alone would possess enough strength or prowess to move the island at hasty speed. With that, Wang Xian returned onto the island and headed for the spiritual medicine garden. He wanted to test his abilities in the art of refining elixir pills. He had just arrived in the garden when he bumped into Mo Yuan and Mo Qinglong. Young master, the duo called out. What is it? Wang Xian asked. Young master, the Dragonians have come with an urgent report. It's regarding the murderers of Mo Ersan and Mo Sani. We've got information, Mo Yuan updated. Have they been found? Wang Xian questioned as he lifted an eyebrow. We've been informed that the selection day for the new saint and saintess of the Heavenly Sound sect has been brought forward. The ceremony will be held tomorrow and the day after, outside their sect ground entrance in the mountains, during which the murderers will appear. Mo Yuan answered. But many of their sect experts will be present then. The possibility of the Abyss to carry out a successful assassination is nil, Wang Xian said doubtfully. According to the rules of the sect, once the candidates for the saint and saintess have been confirmed, they'll be protected by inborn experts. It's only when the Abyss has surpassed the inborn status that they will be able to succeed, Mo Qinglong elaborated. Dragon King, should Master and I strike together right away, or should we continue waiting? Mo Yuan asked. Since they've been found, we'll make our move, Wang Xian replied as his eyes narrowed. The venue for the selection of the saint and saintess by the Heavenly Sound sect, you say? The one who's able to order the mission is presumably a strong competitor for the saintess. He continued. Let's exact our revenge today. Mo Yuan and Mo Qinglong chimed in together. Chapter 320. A Zither as a Gift 1. Wang Xian didn't like things to drag on in whatever he did. Since he had verified where the culprit had appeared, he would want to resolve this matter quickly. Heavenly Sound sect. Wang Xian pondered for a while before asking, among the sacred sects, what's the strength level of the Heavenly Sound sect? Among the 8 sacred sects, the strength of the Heavenly Sound sect is ranked 5th in the underworld. It isn't particularly strong but definitely not weak, replied Mo Qinglong. The 8 sacred sects and 5 sacred clans were the 13 strongest forces in China. Every force had a peerless expert that could send tremors to the entire underworld with a stomp of their foot. Heavenly Sound sect was located in Ning City. Wang Xian and the group had been there once. There wasn't any direct flight from Rivertown to Ning City. If they were to travel by car, it would take at least 8 to 9 hours. It's already past 2 in the morning. When we get to Ning City, it will be close to noon. Wang Xian looked at the time on his watch and had no intention of wasting any time. We will head there right away. Both of you come with me. Let Mo Sherwu attend to the matters of the spiritual island. Besides that, get the abyss along. This time, he was prepared to do this under the identity of the abyss. Wang Xian still did not wish to enter into direct confrontation with a sacred sect. Moreover, with his current strength, he wouldn't be a match for a sacred clan unless they were in the seas. On land, his battle prowess was similar to a Dan realm expert. After witnessing the strength of Sui Huang from the Sui family, Wang Xian conjectured that there would also be Dan realm experts within these sacred sects and clans. Moreover, a sacred sect had a lot more inborn realm experts than Wang Xian. Since the abyss was already known throughout the underworld, it didn't matter if their name got a little more publicity. Wang Xian revealed a faint smile. Since eliminating the Dark Conjurers, the abyss was widely recognized as the strongest assassin group in the underworld. There were even some members of the underworld who believed that they possessed the strength of a sacred sect, and was the most horrifying uprising force at this moment. Let's return immediately, Wang Xian said to Mo Qinglong and Mo Yuan. Yes, young master. The two of them nodded their heads. Wang Xian hesitated for a while, returned to the treasure room and took Zhan Lu and Hao Zhong with him. Her zither was destroyed because of me previously. I shall compensate her with this. At the thought of the cold expression of Tang Yinxian with her broken zither, he shook his head slightly. Holding Zhan Lu and Hao Zhong, Wang Xian headed towards the shore. A short distance away, a yacht awaited him in the middle of the sea. Other than his yacht, there were over 20 ships in the surroundings. Wang Xian jumped into the air and landed on one of the ships. He collected it as resources for his dragon palace before doing the same for the rest of the ships. Wang Xian felt it was a little wasteful to convert these ships directly into resources. When he returned to his yacht, Wang Xian placed the zither in his room. Lying on the bed, he soon fell asleep. The yacht moved rapidly. When he arrived at Rivertown, dawn had broken. Wang Xian hesitated for a moment. In the end, he did not make a trip back home first. Instead, he got Mo Qinglong to drive the caravan towards Ning City directly. When they arrived at Ning City, it was already noon. The 7 Dragonians from the abyss had arrived before them. Wang Xian took out his phone, hesitating for a moment before dialing a number. Hello. You. From the other end of the phone call, a pleasing voice sounded. It was clear that she was shocked too. At this moment, Tang Yinxian was in a 5-star hotel in Ning City. Around the hotel, the disciples of the Heavenly Sound Sect were hosting a banquet. A 1.8-meter-tall young man stood in the middle of the field. He was wearing a set of exquisite and traditional clothing, just like a prince in ancient times. He stood proudly with his chest up and a cup of red wine in his hand. A group of good-looking men and ladies surrounded him, and were constantly showering him with compliments and pleasantries. The young man was the saint of the Heavenly Sound Sect. He had just emerged victorious from the selection today, and would likely become the future elder, or even sect leader of the Heavenly Sound Sect. Tang Yinxian took a glance at the saint in the banquet before walking to a corner of the banquet. That young man had actually called her. She could still feel the palpitations and shock at the thought of the news she came across 2 days after she returned to the sect. At that time, the strength that the young man had demonstrated greatly shocked her. However, all her attention was on her broken zither. When she heard that the abyss had annihilated the Dark Conjurers, she stared blankly into space for over 10 minutes. She knew that the young man was taking revenge for his subordinates. After luring out the assassins of the Dark Conjurers and getting some clues, he went to annihilate the entire Dark Conjurer organization. In that case, the assassin group, the Abyss, was most likely his. Even a sacred sect had to be careful when dealing with the Dark Conjurers. However, the Dark Conjurers were easily annihilated by the Abyss. And now, the Abyss was classified as one of the existences that one shouldn't mess with. Recalling that young man in the Abyss, which was in the limelight recently, she felt conflicted. Tang Yinxian, I'm in Ning City. Are you free now? I'm sorry about your zither previously. Therefore, I brought you something this time. The voice of that young man sounded from the other end of the phone. This shocked Tang Yinxian. She frowned, hesitated for a while and nodded her head before answering. Yeah, where are you now? LZZ International Hotel. LZZ. Tang Yinxian was taken aback. That's the hotel she was in currently. Tell me about your exact location. I'll look for you immediately. I'm in a corner of the restaurant lobby. Alight, wait there for me. I'll be right there. Tang Yinxian didn't reject Wang Xian. She was still curious about that mysterious and insanely powerful young man. Now that he said he had something for her, she would like to take a look. Tang Yinxian hung up the phone. She hesitated for a moment before heading for the exit. Junior sister Yinxian. Where are you going? At this moment, a voice sounded behind her. Tang Yinxian frowned slightly but forced a faint smile out. Saint. She bowed respectfully and continued. I have some urgent matters and have to go out for a while. Oh, what urgent matters does junior sister have to leave in such a hurry? Are you worried about the selection tomorrow? The young man had a cup of wine in his hand and exhibited strong confidence. The vibes around him were something that even famous male stars couldn't match. Yeah. Tang Yinxian nodded her head customarily. There are some things I have to get prepared. Junior sister, if you agree to what I've suggested, I'll lend you the Sky Devil zither. The young man stared at Tang Yinxian intensely. Thank you, Saint, for your kind intentions. I have some urgent matters to attend to and shall leave now. Once again, let me congratulate you on becoming the saint. Tang Yinxian frowned slightly, gestured and left. Saint, hasn't Tang Yinxian agreed to be your girl? What an arrogant girl. With her current standing, she's not qualified to be with you. That's right. Our saint is exceptional, and will definitely become the management of the Heavenly Sound sect in the future. For that Tang Yinxian, her chances of becoming the saintess tomorrow couldn't exceed 10%. Senior sister who has over an 80% chance of becoming the saintess. Moreover, senior sister who is the daughter of our vice sect leader, and is interested only in you. I feel that senior sister who is a better match for our saint. Behind them, a group walked forward and spoke to the saint after hearing his conversation with Tang Yinxian. Enough! The saint's eyebrows knitted together and he was clearly displeased. Senior sister who? That woman comes from a great background. Her looks and talents are also exceptional. However, she has already lost her chastity and couldn't be compared with the demure and pure Tang Yinxian. Chapter 321. A zither as a gift, too. Seeing that the saint had turned restless, the crowd went silent in an instant. Some of the female disciples looked at Tang Yinxian from the back with faces of envy. How does a lass like you with no prominent background deserve favor from the saint? With curiosity in mind, Tang Yinxian walked towards the reception of the hotel restaurant. In favor of the saint's kindness, she paid no attention to the commotion behind. She had not been supported by such strong backing at Heavenly Sound sect. She had been discovered by a half-step inborn from the sect by chance, and taken in as a disciple from there. Through her own efforts, she had ascended to become one of the top disciples in a short span of just over a decade. Yet, despite having achieved her current status as a half-step inborn, she was not very confident in the face of the assessment today. Given that even the granddaughter of the vice sect leader also had to vie for the position of saintess these days, her master too had little confidence in her becoming one. She was bound to lose, should there be a competitor whose natural abilities were paralleled with hers, but came supported by rich resources and strong backing. This was something Tang Yinxian had found hard to concede. Where are they? Tang Yinxian asked as she came to the restaurant entrance. She swept a glance inside and saw a familiar figure at the far end. Walking over, Tang Yinxian looked at the party's surroundings. He was seated alone, whereas another two familiar figures sat at a table nearby. Our lovely Tang Yinxian, to think you made it here so quickly. Wang Xian greeted with a smile, waving as he saw Tang Yinxian approaching. The delicacies on the table had remained untouched. Alongside lay a precious sword and a box, where the latter resembled a zither casing. Somewhat doubtful, Tang Yinxian looked at Wang Xian and asked, "Young Master Wang, may I know the purpose of you asking me over?" With a warm smile, the current Wang Xian appeared gentlemanly and dashing. In fact, he looked much more elegant than the current saint. But Tang Yinxian knew better. This young man standing before her was highly likely to be the leader of the Abyss, the organization feared by many. Mainly to apologize over the issue of the zither from before, Wang Xian explained. He noticed that Tang Yinxian was not carrying any zither on her back. Likely to say, she had not found another one worth bringing around, after the one gifted by her late mother was ruined. "You don't have to," Tang Yinxian declined upon the mention of zither. With a cold expression, she remained standing instead of sitting down. Seeing her slightly glum face, Wang Xian shook his head. "I went to Ning City to settle some matters. It so happened that I obtained a zither yesterday, but I've got no use for it. So I'm giving it to you," he chirped. As he explained, he retrieved the zither of Hao Zhong and placed it in front of Tang Yinxian. "I don't suppose you'll want to chat with me while standing. I was the reason why your zither was ruined. So here's one to make it up to you," he added. Tang Yinxian hesitated for a moment, before she seated herself across from Wang Xian and nodded. "I'll decline the zither. Since you've helped to elevate my cultivation, we're even," she said in return. Wang Xian muttered as he rested his back on the chair. "Take it. Having accepted $2 billion from you and being your bodyguard for several days, we're actually more indebted to you, to be exact," Wang Xian persuaded. Tang Yinxian procrastinated briefly and looked at the zither on the table before shaking her head. "I've already got one," she rejected again. "Just take it as you're told. Accept it so we can call it even," Wang Xian persisted. With a tinge of dominance, Wang Xian placed the zither at a spot nearer Tang Yinxian. "We may not be close. But even so, I don't wish to owe anyone anything," he continued. After which, he gestured towards the food on the table. "Have you eaten? If you haven't, let me give you a treat," he invited. Lifting an eyebrow, Tang Yinxian nodded in reply, "Sure." She picked the zither up and placed it on her side, before picking up the cutlery and starting to eat. Wang Xian took a look at her before starting on his meal. Neither Tang Yinxian nor Wang Xian had uttered a word then. It was an admiration of aesthetics which Wang Xian had towards Tang Yinxian and her melodic voice. Other than that, he had no ulterior motives. As Tang Yinxian was a very slow eater, she had yet to be done even long after Wang Xian had finished eating. He played on his mobile phone and had no interaction with her. It was a rather rare sight. A handsome man and beautiful lady seated together in a corner, having a meal, but with no interaction throughout otherwise. "I'm going off," Tang Yinxian said to Wang Xian upon finishing her meal. "Sure. It's already after 10. Time for me to head back and turn in as well," Wang Xian replied, smiling. Tang Yinxian looked at him with doubt before picking up the zither on her side. Carrying the zither on her back, she headed for the exit. Wang Xian walked alongside Tang Yinxian while holding his long sword. Once again, there was no interaction between them whatsoever. Both of them had just stepped out of the restaurant when they heard a few shocked voices coming at them. "Oh, it's Junior Sister Tang," a voice called. "It's Junior Tang indeed. Junior, didn't you say you were leaving early for an urgent matter?" another asked. Tang Yinxian stood dazed for a moment as Wang Xian remained by her side. Slightly taken aback, he too looked over at the crowd with gleaming eyes. A figure emerged in his mind, which stood in contrast to the group ahead. "There's a guy with her. Hey, look everyone. Junior Tang's carrying a new zither on her back," someone in the crowd exclaimed. "Who's that young man?" another asked. The group of disciples from the Heavenly Sound sect stared at Tang Yinxian in utter confusion. Tang Yinxian had left the saint's feast earlier in a hurry. Little would anyone expect to see her meeting a young man here. There seemed to be more than meets the eye with what was going on. Upon seeing Tang Yinxian's look of shock, which was soon followed by a frown, the saint, who was walking in the middle, withdrew his smile. He scanned Wang Xian over before turning to Tang Yinxian and asking coolly, "Junior Yinxian, didn't you say you had something urgent going on?" I did. My friend wanted to give me this zither as a present. So I'm here to collect it. Tang Yixian explained and met them with a calm look. Oh, what zither is that? Senior's curious now, Junior. You've even rejected my Sky Devil zither. I'm curious to find out which zither your friend has gifted you with. The saint refuted. As he smiled coldly, the saint turned to look at Wang Xian. He raised his head slightly and stared down at Wang Xian snobbishly. Who's this friend of yours here? I'm the saint of the Heavenly Sound sect, he announced. Just a nobody, here to present a zither as a gift. Wang Xian replied plainly as he looked at the saint. Haha, no names mentioned, huh? By all means. I won't remember it anyway. The saint smirked. Junior sister, what good zither can a nobody gift you with? Consider my offer. After all, it's your most crucial selection test tomorrow, he advised Tang Yixian. Dismissing the saint's words, Tang Yixian looked on with a face of dismay and annoyance. She turned to check on Wang Xian, to see if he had been offended. A nobody? This gentleman here is most likely the leader of the abyss. How does that make him a nobody? Right now, she was more afraid of Wang Xian, for fear that he may strike at this saint any moment and finish him off. After all, she was not sure if Wang Xian would be mindful towards a saint from the Heavenly Sound sect. There's no need for that. But I'm thankful for your kind intentions, Senior. As for tomorrow, I'll leave it to my own fortunes to see if I can make it as the saintess. Tang Yixian excused herself graciously. Junior Tang, you accepted a gift zither from a nobody right away, but kept turning down the help offered to you by a saint. Isn't this too much? A female disciple snapped. She resented Tang Yixian with a face green with jealousy. That's right. How can a lousy zither from a nobody compare to the Saint Sky Devil zither? Junior, is there something going on between you and this lad? Another questioned. Chapter 322. Saint? One strike. Several female disciples of the Heavenly Sound sect mocked Tang Yixian. They looked at her before turning to Wang Xian. When the saint heard what the other disciples had said, he was clearly displeased. He was the saint of the Heavenly Sound sect and had been wooing Tang Yixian for some time. All the gifts he wished to give to her were rejected. For the saintess selection the next day, he disregarded the possibility of incurring the displeasure of the vice sect leader by wanting to lend his Sky Devil zither to her. In the end, Tang Yixian rejected all his kindness and accepted a zither from an unknown person. Even he would not believe if one said there was nothing between them. Tang Yixian heard the ridicule of her peers and was a little embarrassed. Cough cough. At this moment Wang Xian coughed twice. He looked to the disciples of the Heavenly Sound sect and said, I'm sorry. If you guys don't know anything, please choose your words wisely. I'm a married man. Wang Xian continued, a gift from an unknown person might not always be a shitty item. Besides, I have not heard of all your names either. Huh. Wang Xian's response made the crowd of Heavenly Sound sect's disciples raise their eyebrows. They looked at him and started scrutinizing him from top to bottom. You have not heard of our saint's name? You must be cut off from the world. You can go look him up, the 9th-ranked youth on the Outstanding Young Heroes chart. You must not have seen the world, a young man said with contempt. He's just another frog in a well. The only question is which sect he's from. Tell us about it or let us see what you're capable of. The other young man lifted his head slightly and looked mockingly at Wang Xian. Haha, if there's time you will naturally be able to see it. Wang Xian smiled and replied with hidden meaning. It seems like we have someone who is really confident about his strength. Instead of waiting for another day, why don't we do it today? Show us a little. Seeing how casual and relaxed Wang Xian was, the saint revealed a smirk. Moving his arm slightly, a long flute appeared in his hand. The metal flute spun in his hand and pointed at Wang Xian. Metal attribute aura circled the flute, giving off a sharp glow in the process. This is my secondary weapon, Golden Imperial Flute. Saint, this rascal is clearly acting tough in front of us. How could he possibly compare with you? He's just a nobody who talks louder than what he's capable of. I, your junior brother, can easily defeat him. A young man smiled and looked at Wang Xian when he saw the saint take out his weapon. At this moment, he smiled mockingly and gradually placed both of his hands before his chest. Contour integral. Suddenly he chanted some music notes. The devilish music headed towards Wang Xian's ears. Suddenly, strong winds started blowing around them. The chilling cold wind turned into musical notes and struck towards Wang Xian. The young man stared at Wang Xian with a mocking smile. Clearly, he wanted Wang Xian to make a fool out of himself. The surrounding disciples of the Heavenly Sound sect also looked on with ridicule. As disciples of the Heavenly Sound sect, their methods of attacking were creepier than other sections. They could integrate their attribute energies into sounds. A strong inborn expert with high music attainments could even make one lose his sense of direction and self. In their view, an unknown rascal tried to act tough in front of them. That would be equivalent to asking them to humiliate him. Crack! At this moment, a crisp sound of a sharp weapon propagated. A stream of metallic energy disintegrated all the wind attribute musical notes and headed for the young man's palm. Art! The young man cried out pitifully and immediately moved his hands aside. Looking at his own palm, he was horrified. Long and deep wounds had appeared on his palms. They were so deep that one could see the bones. Fresh blood was oozing out from the wound. You dare to attack me? The young man revealed a pained expression. He held onto his arm and stared solemnly at Wang Xian. SSS. When the disciples of the Heavenly Sound sect saw the injuries on the young man's hands, they gasped. Their pupils constricted as they stared at Wang Xian. Huh! The saint frowned and murderous intent gleamed in his eyes. He looked at the treasured sword in Wang Xian's hand and commented, You are pretty strong, but you must be courting death to injure the disciples of the Heavenly Sound sect. As he spoke, he moved the golden imperial flute in his hand and pointed directly at Wang Xian. The next moment the metal attribute energy shot out. It was the disciple of the Heavenly Sound sect that had started this. However, they ended up chiding Wang Xian. How domineering and unreasonable. Saint, this is a friend of mine. Tang Yinxian was shocked. She quickly moved to stop the saint from attacking. She was really afraid that the saint would offend Wang Xian and Wang Xian would kill the saint on the spot. Besides that, she was a little surprised by Wang Xian's attribute. If she had remembered things correctly, he was using water attribute attacks while fighting with the assassins from the Dark Conjurer. However, he was using metal attribute attacks currently. Your friend. Seeing Tang Yinxian blocking his attack, the saint's expression turned gloomy. He dares to attack the disciple of the Heavenly Sound sect. As the saint, I have to stand up for them. I'll cripple anyone who dares to injure us. Could it be that you, Tang Yinxian, wish to stop me? As he spoke, he stared harshly at Tang Yinxian. The anger in his heart raged even fiercer. Hehe. You started the fight and yet tried to stop me from retaliating. Saint? I've really not heard of the Saint of the Heavenly Sound sect or the 9th rank existence of the Outstanding Young Heroes chart. In my eyes, Saint? Hehe. One strike is enough. Seeing the young man before him trying to attack him, Wang Xian's expression turned chilly. He lifted Zhanlu in his right hand. Dang. Diske. I'll let you know the consequences of being arrogant and talking big in front of me. Seeing that Wang Xian wanted to retaliate, murderous intent gleamed in the saint's eyes. He waved the golden imperial flute in his hand. Woo-woo. As the air entered the long flute, rapid notes were made. A sharp metallic edge shot towards Wang Xian. Dang. However, Wang Xian drew Zhanlu partially out at this moment. The intense metallic edge on it formed a razor-sharp golden sword. Before the sword left the scabbard, the glow of the sword had already been shot forward as an attack. The metallic edge from the golden imperial flute vibrated a little in the air before disintegrating rapidly. As for the sword glow of Zhanlu, it slashed towards the golden imperial flute in the saint's hand. Pa-pa! Before the saint could react to it, the sword glow had split the golden imperial flute and was striking towards his shoulders. What? The saint was horrified. He immediately dodged to the side. However, the razor-sharp sword glow still landed on his shoulders. Instantly, his clothes were dyed red from blood. Pa! The golden imperial flute split in the middle and fell to the ground, giving off a crisp voice. One strike was enough to split the weapon of the saint of the heavenly sound sect and injured the saint. Trash! Wang Xian kept Jean Lu away and looked nonchalantly at the crowd. Without having to pull Jean Lu completely out of the scabbard, their saint was already injured by it. We will meet again if fate dictates. Wang Xian looked at Tang Yinxian and spoke with a smile. After which, he turned around and left, as he felt disinterested. Tang Yinxian stood rooted to the ground. After which, she turned to look at the figure behind her. Chapter 323. Appearance of Hao Zhong and the Soundless Instrument 1. Insolence, blatant insolence. How dare you injure me? How dare you do this to a saint of the sacred sect? The saint growled. With a deathly stare, he glared ahead at Wang Xian, who was leaving. The contempt and the look of disregard made Wang Xian appear all the more indifferent. Leave your name. In no time I'll slaughter you with my own bare hands, the saint called out harshly as he watched Wang Xian from behind. Upon hearing the saint, Wang Xian stopped short and turned around to look at the young man. You've lost your chance, he mocked. In a fit of anger, the saint snapped in a grimace as his eyes filled with bloodthirst. He took a quick look at his arm and called out, I'll kill you soon enough. Wang Xian looked back at the saint. Smiling, he beamed with a glimmer in his eyes before turning to leave. Saint, are you all right? A voice asked. Saint, let me have a look at your injuries. I have some elixir pills with me. Another called out in concern. The crowd of disciples had barely recovered from shock. To think that the saint had been injured by a nobody with one mere strike. Just how could this be? I'm all right, the saint brushed them aside. With a glum face, he took one look at the injuries on his shoulders. As he watched Wang Xian leave, a young man tried to appease the saint. Saint, had the lad not snuck an attack, and had you brought your sky devil zither along, you would have maimed such a lad easily, he flattered. Humph, the saint replied impassively. Displeased, he looked at Tang Yinxian and pressed her for an answer. Who is he? Which sect or clan is he from? Upon hearing the saint's words, Tang Yinxian furrowed her brows and shook her head. Saint, I have something to attend to. I'll return to the sect now, she replied before making a direct exit. Hold it right there, Tang Yinxian. The saint is asking you a question. A female disciple of the Heavenly Sound sect yelled at Tang Yinxian. Ignoring the call, Tang Yinxian excused herself again. Apologies, saint. I'm feeling unwell, so I'll head back to rest, she said before hastening her steps. Feeling helpless, she sighed softly as she rushed back to the sect. Well, this Tang Yinxian, the saint rebuked. As he watched Tang Yinxian disappear gradually, he headed straight for the exit with a steely expression. Saint, a few disciples called out with unease. Go, get me details of the lad's identity, the saint ordered one of them as he turned his head back. Yes, saint, the crowd of disciples replied hurriedly, shocked by the comment. The saint of a sacred sect is not someone to be trifled with. Offenders shall die. Oh. As Wang Xian entered the presidential suite, he was immediately welcomed by Mo Qinglong, Mo Yuan and 7 Dragonians. Young master, they greeted respectfully. Just place the information you've got over there. Wang Xian replied. Acknowledging the gang with a wave, he picked up the documents and headed for the bedroom. Noted. Mo Qinglong and gang nodded before they headed outside. Meanwhile, a worn-out Tang Yinxian returned to her room, located atop the 9th summit of Ning City's 9 Peaks mountain. As she placed the zither on the desk, she looked to the side, where 2 zither rested. One of them was covered in cracks, and bore obvious signs of repair. But repaired zither could no longer be used. As for the other zither, it boasted an all-green body which exuded both extravagance and beauty. This was a zither gifted to her by her master. This green zither had been obtained by her master at an overly exorbitant price. According to her master, it was a level 6 zither. As with all things in life, even weapons are classified by levels as they are graded similarly to humans. In fact, where grading is concerned, only the classification of spiritual grasses and elixir pills differ vastly from the others. Weapons are graded in ascending levels, and where a weapon has surpassed level 9, it would then be named a metamortal spiritual weapon, also known as an inborn spiritual weapon. Inborn spiritual weapons possess a spirituality of their own. When a weapon ascends to such a level, it gains unimaginable powers. Take the ancient sword of Zhonlu which Wang Xian now owned, for instance. It is no sword to be owned by mere mortals, given that it possesses energy of the gold summit. An average martial artist could even be killed by the sword simply by holding it. Similarly, an expert martial artist of level 8 or above could challenge someone at superseding levels, simply by wielding the sword. So much so that a level 9 martial artist could kill a half-step inborn with the Zhonlu sword in hand, which is what makes an inborn spiritual weapon so formidable. That said, inborn spiritual weapons were few and far between in the current world, as there were barely any blacksmiths left. Along with the art of equipment refining being long lost, all current renowned weapons were the ones passed down from ancient times. Thus, this level 6 green zither gifted by her master was incredibly rare. Tang Yinxian looked at the casing which held the zither from Wang Xian. Its appearance was very common, and it even bore a trademark. Lingyin, Tang Yinxian chimed, giggling as she looked at the trademark brand. Lingyin was currently one of the top zither brands. An exquisitely customized zither could cost tens of thousands, while the pricier ones could even fetch more than $1 million. Yet, in her eyes, these supposedly branded zither were no different from the ordinary ones. They could not compare to the green zither gifted to her by her master, which currently rested by her side. To think an invincible expert of his times is this insincere. How miserly! Tang Yinxian pouted, looking really adorable. It appeared she would only reveal this endearing side of her when she was alone. How ordinary it is. It's also an ordinary zither which mother gifted me. She presumed. She had been prepared to reject this gift from the start, and hence gave little thought to Wang Xian's intentions. As she opened the casing, a simple yet classic-looking garnet zither emerged before her. Written on it were several traditional characters. On the center of the zither were 2 enlarged characters. Stupefied, Tang Yinxian stared at the 2 characters in a daze. Hao Zhong, she mumbled, repeating the name. Astounded, her face twitched in shock. She placed her hands on the zither immediately. Zing ring ring. Suddenly, a melodic note rang through her mind. She shuddered as though she had heard heavenly music. In an instant she felt as though she was bursting with energy. Her vision became crystal clear, while the spiritual energy in her circled frantically. Hao Zhong. To think it's the zither of Hao Zhong. Tang Yinxian shook at the thought. She caressed the zither with trembling hands, sensing each chord as she went, her eyes filled with disbelief. Hao Zhong, the world's #1 zither. Used by the top zither artist in history, Master Boya. Subsequently passed on to Duke Huan of Qi, leader of the 5 hegemons during the spring and autumn period. Deafening as it plays, the zither chimes clear like a bell and trumpets like a blowing horn. Legend has it that the Duke played music on the zither during a war to boost morale, and because of that, he emerged victorious and rose to become leader of the 5 hegemons. Tang Yinxian murmured incessantly with burning passion in her eyes. Hao Zhong, the legendary inborn spiritual weapon. To think that this, she uttered under her breath. Gradually, she began to recollect herself as she continued to caress the zither. Just then a thought came to her mind, and she flipped the zither over immediately. On the bottom hung an exquisite long scarlet sword. It was known as the enchantment sword. Tang Yinxian bit her lip, blushing as her eyes glinted. To think that a married man would do something like this. Chapter 324. Appearance of Hao Zhong and the Soundless Instrument 2. Enchantment sword, as its name suggested, was a sword of love. According to the latest historical records, Hao Zhong was given to a woman from her husband. Moreover, the husband had included the enchantment sword below the zither for his wife for protection. The enchantment sword was one of the famed swords in history. Although it wasn't as well known as the 10 famed swords, its strength was still well regarded and known by many. This was a sword for the ladies and was featherlight. It was forged from frost metal and the water from a frosty pond. The elemental attribute of the sword was water. It was said that it was just a tinge inferior to an inborn spiritual weapon. As it was kept with the Haozhong zither, it was recorded as Haozhong enchantment sword by historians. Recalling the information regarding Haozhong and the enchantment sword, Tang Yinxian couldn't help but pout. She removed the enchantment sword from the bottom and unsheathed it. Shings! As the sword was unsheathed, the sound it made was pleasing to the ears like flowing water. The entire sword was red other than the edge of the blade. It looked extremely stunning. The sword was light but exceptionally sharp. It was as though there was water flowing on it. Tang Yinxian waved it lightly and the water energy raged. She wasn't well versed in swordsmanship and only knew a little about it. She looked at the bottom of Haozhong. Just as she had expected, there was a sword manual in it. The sword manual recorded the enchantment swordplay. Haozhong is an inborn spiritual weapon, while the enchantment sword is a weapon exceptionally close to the level of an inborn spiritual weapon. Tang Yinxian held them dearly and was really satisfied with them. However, at the thought of the meaning behind these weapons, her expression changed. Since I have accepted them, just forget about the hidden significance behind them. She smiled gently and placed the Haozhong back into the cover carefully. Looking at the bright moon outside her room, her mood greatly improved. She walked back to her bed and started her rest. The next morning, the entire Nine Peaks mountain was shrouded in a festive-like atmosphere. Beautiful music could be heard and the surrounding birds were dancing in the skies. Other than the alluring music, calls of various birds formed a beautiful melody. Thousands and thousands of birds were flapping their wings and moving with the music. All the disciples of the Heavenly Sound sect had to practice their musical instruments and cultivate in the morning. It was especially so for today as the entire Nine Peaks mountain was filled with all kinds of music. The selection of the saint had ended yesterday and the selection of the saintess would start today. Tang Yinxian carried Haozhong and arrived at the backyard just like any other morning. She gently cleaned the place where she would be placing her zither. Placing her zither on the table, the surrounding music had not affected her emotions. Tang Yinxuan's eyes lit up as she looked at Haozhong before her. She placed her slender and fair fingers gently upon it. Ling! A musical note sounded. At this moment, this note resounded rapidly throughout a radius of 1,000 meters. What happened? Why did my zither go soundless? This is strange. What is happening? That musical note previously erased all other sounds. What is this about? What's the issue? Why is my eru not making any sound? At this point, raucous discussion broke out around her. Exclamations and questions came from disciples of the Heavenly Sound sect in all directions. Tang Yinxian was taken aback. She stared with her eyes wide open at Haozhong, which was placed in front of her. With a bitter smile on her face, she kept it away and returned to her room. At this very moment, a woman on the main peak of the Nine Peaks mountain opened her eyes abruptly. What's that sound? Could it be the Heavenly Sound zither? It doesn't sound like. The woman stood up, closed her eyes and wanted to listen attentively. However, the same sound did not come again. In the end, she sat back down feeling baffled. Oh, Feng Tianhua became the saint yesterday. I wonder who will become the saintess today. Do you even need to ask about this? It will definitely be Senior Sister who is now a half-step to Inborn Realm expert, and possesses the level 7 ancient temple zither. Among the female disciples, she tops in terms of strength. It's still hard to tell. Tang Yinxian, Feng Zhuhua and Ouying Yan have all reached the half-step to Inborn Realm. They are also strong contenders. In my opinion, Senior Sister whose chances of winning are at least 80%. Strength is just one aspect and you should consider their influence too. Many people are supporting Senior Sister who now. Moreover, Senior Sister who has 2 half-step to Inborn Realm subordinates. One of them even made it to the top 20 of the outstanding young heroes chart. When the sun had risen, the disciples of the Heavenly Sound sect made their way towards the main training field. On their way there, the disciples were discussing fervently. However, they weren't too concerned about what had caused their musical instruments to go soundless. Tang Yinxian carried 2 zither as she made her way to the main training field. Along the way, the other disciples greeted her respectfully. There were also some disciples who simply gave her a cold glare. The main training field of the Heavenly Sound Sect lay in the middle of the Nine Peaks Mountain. The Heavenly Sound Sect didn't particularly have lots of disciples. For young men and women, there were only approximately 1,000 of them. They had exceptional demeanors and were either handsome or beautiful. In terms of looks, the disciples of the Heavenly Sound Sect were all outstanding. Despite that, Tang Yinxian still shone brightly with her exceptional vibes and exquisite looks. The disciples of the Heavenly Sound Sect arrived at the training field one after another. They stood in an orderly fashion around it while waiting patiently. The arrival of Tang Yinxian had drawn the attention of many people. Other than her, there were also a few other girls who were exceptionally attention-grabbing. "Senior sister, who is here?" At this moment, a scream came from the crowd. Everyone looked over and saw an alluring young lady with an enchanting figure walking towards the training field. She was dressed in black and looked just like a succubus in the night. Every action of hers drew the attention of all the men in the field. A large number of male disciples couldn't help but swallow their saliva. She was one of the few disciples that practiced the Fei demonic note. Two young men followed behind the young lady proudly. Despite being surrounded by outstanding disciples of the Heavenly Sound Sect, they were still carrying a slight sense of superiority. Take a look. Senior sister who didn't bring her ancient temple zither along but another zither instead. That's true. It looks a little ordinary. However, with senior sister whose strength, others wouldn't be a match for her even if she used an ordinary zither. The saint is here. At this moment the saint, who was dressed in elegant Heavenly Sound Sect's traditional costume, walked out proudly. Over a dozen disciples followed behind him deferentially. The saint's face looked devoid of expressions and seemed exceptionally cold, callous but exceptional. "Saint!" The surrounding crowd greeted the saint respectfully. The saint nodded his head faintly, walked to a seat below the stage and sat down. This was a seat reserved for the higher management of the Heavenly Sound Sect, and the saint naturally was qualified to have a seat too. Soon the elders, vice-sect leader and sect leader of the Heavenly Sound Sect arrived at the training field. Chapter 325. Appearance of Hao Zhong and the Soundless Instrument 3. Greetings, sect leader. The disciples greeted as they bowed to an elder who was gradually making his way to the central seat. As he lifted an arm, the leader of the Heavenly Sound Sect swept his glance across everyone present, and began to speak. Meanwhile, 10 masked men from the abyss emerged in a secluded corner just outside of the Nine Peaks Mountain. These 10 men were none other than Wang Xian and his gang. The information which Mo Yuan and the rest had obtained did not seem out of the ordinary. In addition, as a sacred sect, the Heavenly Sound Sect had managed to cover their tracks well enough. Hence, the group could only sneak their way in by means of their incredible abilities and combat powers. The Heavenly Sound Sect is unlike the Flame Palace. As a long-established sacred sect, their defense is no doubt more complicated than one can imagine. Wang Xian explained. After which, Wang Xian and gang peered at the 9 gigantic summits with heavy looks on their faces. Yet, other than its impressive heights and majestic beauty, one could barely detect any sense of danger from the 9 summits. They seemed to be nothing more than 9 ordinary mountains. Yet, it was the seeming mediocrity of the mountains which cautioned the group. After all, the Heavenly Sound Sect was not the Flame Palace, hence its defense was anything but simple. Wang Xian gazed at the 9 typical mountains ahead as he narrowed his eyes. In a quick movement, he changed his position and hopped onto a tree along the fringes of the mountain. Tweet tweet. Just then came a chirp from a tree branch beside Wang Xian. It was a bird staring intently at Wang Xian as it called out. Soon after, the little bird flew towards the 9 Peaks Mountain and within its vicinity. Huh. Wang Xian frowned in confusion. With quick reflexes, the power of the divine dragon oozed out of him and overshadowed the surroundings. Tweet tweet. The little bird flapped its wings as hard as it could, before it flopped onto the ground. So that's how they work. Wang Xian exclaimed in realization. With a grin he continued, no doubt a sacred clan. Even the mode of defense is beyond expectations. Wang Xian observed his surroundings and noticed an overwhelming number of nests. These bird nests came in all sorts and had settled on the branches of trees all over Nine Peaks Mountain. He even briefly spotted a nest which spanned about 6 to 7 meters across, located thousands of meters away. With such a gigantic nest, one can easily imagine the size of the bird settling in it. It must be a flying bird of the inborn level. The Heavenly Sound sect has resorted to using flying birds as implicit sentinels numbering up to the tens of thousands, perhaps even the millions. Seems like there's no way of hiding any entry into the sect grounds, Wang Xian assessed. He was mildly impressed by the sect, which no doubt deserved its sacred status. By using millions of birds as surveillance, even a mosquito flying in would be clear for all to see. That said, these birds can't be that intelligent. They also possess obvious shortcomings. Wang Xian exclaimed with a faint smile, while Mo Qinglong and the rest scurried over. Let's go, Wang Xian directed. But as he was about to make a move, a bunch of tree branches clung onto Wang Xian and gang, twining them in like saplings. In one leap he sprung forward. The birds around looked over in curiosity, but they soon became indifferent once again, and continued to chirp incessantly while resting on the branches. They were, after all, ordinary birds with low intelligence, to the extent that some of them had no idea as to why these few saplings could actually move. The 10 men shot through the Nine Peaks Mountain at lightning speed, and in no time arrived at the peak of one of the mountains. Oh, over there. Wang Xian pointed as he narrowed his focus. In a flash, he landed mid-mountain on one of the nearest summits, and stared coldly at the training field. Meanwhile, at the training field, a girl dressed in all black was suspended in midair with a black devil zither. Across from her stood another girl with a refined and graceful face. Panicking while cold sweat trickled down her forehead, the young maiden clung onto her pipa as she battled the girl dressed in black. Standing beside Wang Xian, Mo Qinglong looked at the training field, where Hu Qingqing was. That's the girl Hu Qingqing. Based on the most confidential information from the Dark Conjurers, she's the one who issued the assassination orders. Mo Qinglong pointed out coldly. Not only did she order to have Tang Yinxian killed, she's also involved in 2 other missions, alongside that young man standing at the fringe. The other 2 assassinations were carried out successfully, he added. Wang Xian surveyed the girl in black, who boasted a charming face and a glamorous figure. How unscrupulous! Resorting to killing a fellow sect member for the saintess position. Vile as a woman's heart, more poisonous than a viper's bite or a hornet's sting, Wang Xian said coldly as he observed. Thereafter, he swept his gaze across and counted silently. There are a total of 7 inborn experts with more absent. They've either hidden themselves within the Nine Peaks Mountain, or gone traveling. Wang Xian contemplated in silence. Just 7 inborn experts alone was a handful. Moreover, members of the Heavenly Sound sect were known for their incredible combat powers and powerful attacks. However, Wang Xian and gang had not come to annihilate the Heavenly Sound sect. Rather, they were just here to kill Hu Qingqing. In addition, they need not clash with the sect. Young master, should we just charge over and slaughter her right away? Mo Qinglong asked as he stood beside Wang Xian. Kill, Wang Xian ordered. He had just uttered the word, when he looked below and froze in his tracks. Hold on, he shouted. Yep. Mo Qinglong and the rest nodded in response, and hid away quietly. Senior sister who's too powerful. She's holding the legendary Copperhead Viper Zither in her hands. That's a level 9 Zither. Goodness, where did she get that from? An audience member gasped from amidst the crowd. A level 9 Zither plus senior whose prowess as a half-step inborn, in addition to the unique art of cultivation of our Heavenly Sound sect. Senior who's almost unrivaled amongst the half-step inborns, another added. Seems like it's more or less decided that senior who will become the saintess. She's too powerful. To think that senior sister Fang Zhehua's totally defenseless against her. One more chipped in. It feels like senior whose prowess is about to overpower the saints, a last commented. And there was Hu Qingqing standing on the stage. With a charming smile, she fought on without a care in the world. Around the training field, the crowd of disciples watched on in shock and admiration all at once. The senior management of the Heavenly Sound sect also gazed at Hu Qingqing, pleased with her performance. The prowess she displayed was simply impressive. The Copperhead Viper Zither's a level 9 Zither. It's enough to qualify as the third most powerful Zither within our Heavenly Sound sect. To think that Qingqing managed to obtain it, a senior praised. I'm taken by surprise too. The Copper Viper Zither along with Qingqing's Fei demonic note. She'll be unrivaled in the world of Inborns. Another commented. Congratulations, Vice Sect Leader. You found a successor. A third cheered. On the stage, several elders chatted in whispers to the Vice Sect Leader. Seated in the middle, the Vice Sect Leader responded with a hearty laugh. His granddaughter would soon ascend to become the Saintess. On the training field, Hu Qingqing eyed Tang Yinxian coldly. A look of disdain swept across the former's eye as she glanced at the latter's green zither. Tang Yinxian, just concede defeat. You're no match for me. Nor are you qualified to exchange blows with me. Hu Qingqing gloated. Tang Yinxian had been in another battle earlier, where she had defeated Ouying Yan using her green zither. And although her skills were up to par, it had taken her a long time before she emerged victorious in the battle. This was a huge contrast to Hu Qingqing's easy win. Let's have a fair competition, where both of us will use an ordinary zither. Tang Yinxian suggested to Hu Qingqing in a composed manner. Haha, fair competition using an ordinary zither. Tang Yinxian, are you kidding me? Hu Qingqing laughed. Chapter 326. If the abyss wants you dead, you definitely will be one. A peal of hysterical laughter broke out from Hu Qingqing. Although her laughter was exaggerated, her alluring voice with her trembling enchanting figure made it hard for one to find it annoying. Instead, seductive vibes came from her. Hu Qingqing laughed loudly before looking to Tang Yinxian again and saying, Tang Yinxian, you must be acting naive. Strength includes weapons, cultivation arts, and cultivation realm. You want a fair battle? Hee. What a joke. As she completed her words, she played her Copperhead Viper Zither lightly. Instantly, several demonic snakes appeared before it. I have gone through great lengths to get this Copperhead Viper Zither. You want me to compete fairly with you without it? Hee. Ridicules sounded and the surrounding people looked at Tang Yinxian with doubts. Cough cough. Tang Yinxian is really something to raise a request like this. She's really shameless. Haha, that's right. This is the most interesting request I have heard. A fair battle in her view is to restrict her opponent from bringing out a powerful weapon? I'm really impressed. The thickness of Tang Yinxian's skin is something we couldn't compare with. She's simply shameless. I'm speechless. To obtain the position of the Saintess, she actually raised such a hilarious condition. This Tang Yinxian must be crazy. She couldn't make it. I have long heard that Tang Yinxian rarely interacts with others. It will seem like she's most likely an idiot to raise such a request. Around the training field, the disciples of the Heavenly Sound sect didn't attempt to hide their ridicule after hearing Tang Yinxian's request. Based on the current situation, senior sister who would be certain to inherit the position of Saintess. Therefore, the surrounding disciples weren't wary of Tang Yinxian at all. Furthermore, they might be able to get on the good books of senior sister who by doing so. Haha, Tang Yinxian, you are really interesting. Weapons are naturally a part of one's strength. You want a fair battle? You are really hilarious. Read more chapter on VIP novel. Calm at this moment, the saint who was seated commented. He looked mockingly at Tang Yinxian and continued. You don't have a good zither and so you want to restrict others from using one. TSK. This thought is shameless. That's right. What a naive thought. Senior sister who has a level 9 unique zither. And yet you want her to compete with you on an ordinary zither? In a life and death battle, will one put aside such a unique zither and compete with you on an ordinary zither? A young man standing beside the saint seconded and piled on the ridicules. The saint's expression turned callous. He mumbled softly, if I lend you my level 7 Sky Devil Zither, you might still have a slimmer of hope. If you use that level 6 Zither, Your chances of becoming the saintess are 0. Oh, Tang Yinxian, you really don't know what's best for you. When I get the information on the brat that gave you the zither, I'll let him experience pain worse than death. The selection of the saintess is to show the wisdom, strength, guts, and means of the future saintess. You can keep such a laughable request to yourself. The vice sect leader seated on the stage looked proudly at her own granddaughter before glancing coldly at Tang Yinxian. If you know what's best for you, admit your defeat immediately. If you continue, I'll defeat you. You aren't qualified to compete for the position of saintess with me. Hu Qingqing said to Tang Yinxian with contempt. When Tang Yinxian heard the ridicules from the surrounding disciples, she was taken aback. A cold light flashed in her eyes. In that case, I would like to seek guidance about your strength. Just as she finished her words, she placed her green zither aside. Carrying the other zither, she jumped and landed in the middle of the training field. She stood in the middle of the training field, tapped her arms lightly, and the zither box behind her appeared in front of her. What? Look at the logo on the zither box. Isn't that just an ordinary brand available everywhere? It is. Could it be that Tang Yinxian has given up on using the level 6 green zither and is choosing to use an ordinary zither instead? She's probably worried that the Copperhead Viper zither will destroy her level 6 green zither. After all, that was the best zither Tang Yinxian could come up with. That's highly likely. When the surrounding crowd saw the logo and brand on Tang Yinxian's zither box, they started looking at her with mocking eyes, insulting her. Hehe. What a waste of my time. Hu Qingqing looked at the zither box in front of Tang Yinxian. Coldness gleamed in her eyes as she said nonchalantly, within 5 moves, I will destroy your zither. I hope so. Tang Yinxian was nonchalant about the ridicules from the crowd and Hu Qingqing. She tapped the box lightly and sent it flying down. Please enlighten me. When Hao Zhong appeared before Tang Yinxian, her entire demeanor underwent huge changes. Cold, prideful with a tinge of holiness. She placed her slender fingers on Hao Zhong. The zither her mother had given her was where she deposited her longing for her mother. As for this dull red Hao Zhong, it was the zither she really liked. Hehe. I'll let you witness the might of this legendary zither, and hand you a convincing defeat. Hu Qingqing's expression changed as she appeared to have become one with the Copperhead Viper zither. On her arms, music notes coalesced from the demonic aura that was circulating and flowing constantly. How many strikes do you think, senior sister, who will need to defeat Tang Yinxian? Within 10 strikes. Although Tang Yinxian also possesses half-step to inborn realm strength, the might of the legendary zither isn't something an ordinary zither could possibly match. Haha, my guess is within 5 strikes. Didn't senior sister Hu say she would at most take 5 strikes? Seeing that the battle was about to start soon, the surrounding crowd was thrilled. The saint looked at the middle of the training field and Tang Yinxian emotionlessly. Using an ordinary zither from an unknown and insignificant character against Hu Qingqing with a legendary zither, she must be asking to be shamed. SSS. At this moment Hu Qingqing started playing. Her 5 fingers appeared to have become demonic claws as they moved rapidly on the Copperhead Viper zither. At that instant, a venomous snake made of eerie and cold energies swept towards Tang Yinxian rapidly from the Copperhead Viper zither. As Hu Qingqing moved her fingers even more quickly, thousands of venomous snakes appeared. They emitted horrifying aura and attacked forward in a wave. Senior sister whose attacks are too strong. Tang Yinxian is likely going to be defeated by this strike. When the surrounding disciples saw what happened, they couldn't help but gasp in awe. Tang Yinxian wasn't flustered at all despite facing a large wave of venomous snakes. She placed her hands on Hao Zhong. Just as the venomous snakes were about to hit her, she played Hao Zhong lightly. Ling! At this instant, the surrounding crowd felt as though a downpour had fallen on them. Sounds of rain resounded in their minds. That wave of demonic snakes was flushed towards the floor and dissipated as though it was made of ink. Chapter 327. If the abyss wants you dead, you definitely will be too. Ding-a-ling. The zither began to play, where the notes earlier were just the opening of a tune. Yet, when the music resumed, the crowd realized that the rain they were surrounded by had begun to trickle like a gentle river flowing. A mystifying image appeared in everybody's minds. Just then, Hu Qingqing stood across from the crowd with her eyes wide. Her facial expression changed drastically as she watched the sight before her in utter disbelief. Her body began to tremble as her face grew dark and gnarly. Her demon claws frantically strummed chords on her copper viper zither, and bouts of demonic aura slithered on the instrument. Hurriedly, the aura gathered and transformed into a demonic snake. Yet, Hu Qingqing was appalled to discover that her recital using the copperhead viper zither had produced not a single sound, as though the flowing waters were the only existence around right there and then. Her face showed an unwillingness to concede defeat. Demonic aura then oozed out from her, forming numerous demonic snakes on the copperhead viper zither. Ah! Hu Qingqing snarled while she arched her head skywards and puffed out demonic breaths. The demonic breaths too transformed into snakes, and within a short 2 minutes more than 1,000 of them had formed. The demonic snakes exuded a chilling and steely demeanor, and began to attack in Tang Yinchuan's direction. Just then, the streams of flowing water glowed in sapphire and surged straight ahead for the snakes. Once again, the demonic snakes were rendered defenseless. They resembled ink paintings which were watered down and swept clean, as though they had never existed. What's the situation? How did I get immersed in another world? Hu Qingqing shrieked in surprise. Soon after, the crowd of disciples from the Heavenly Sound sect recovered as though they had just regained consciousness. They gazed towards the arena, looking somewhat lost. It's the realm of music. Goodness, to think we've been dragged into a mirage of music, one exclaimed. How is this possible? This can only be achieved if one is an inborn expert of the ancestral clan. Otherwise, who's able to? A second doubted. This sound, goodness, to think senior sister who's been totally suppressed, the third gasped. It was then that everyone focused their attention on the ongoing battle in the training field. They could see Hu Qingqing strumming away at the zither like a prancing maniac, and yet they could not hear the slightest sound. On the contrary, Tang Yinxian rested her fingers on her zither with a look of tranquility while standing across from Hu Qingqing. In a state of serenity, she started playing, and streaks of water flowed gently down the instrument. The snakes released by Hu Qingqing were wiped out by these gentle flows. The crowd also discovered in shock that the training field had been unknowingly submerged in blue waters. The streaks of sapphire flowed like a stream. Meandering its way over, it moved over to Hu Qingqing and began to circle, as though to envelope her. What's this situation? Why can't I hear Senior Hu's melody? There's only the sound of flowing water I hear. What's going on? A voice questioned. Suppression. It's the legendary absolute suppression. The copperhead viper zither's been absolutely suppressed, to the point where its melody has been completely overpowered by that of another zither's. Another explained in astonishment. Suppression? How's this possible? The copperhead viper's regarded as a legendary level 9 zither. Another argued. A look of disbelief swept over the crowd of disciples. To think that a level 9 zither was unable to produce any notes. This inborn spiritual weapon. To think it's an inborn spiritual weapon. A voice blurted out. Oh. Meanwhile, on stage, the senior management of the Heavenly Sound sect was startled. Even the sect leader stood up flabbergasted, as they all turned their eyes to the zither alongside Tang Yinxian. What? One gulped. How's this possible? Another gasped in disbelief. A zither that's of the inborn spiritual weapon level. How's this possible? Our entire Heavenly Sound sect has only got one zither of the inborn level. The Heavenly Sound zither. To think Tang Yinxian has got one too. The third uttered. If it isn't a zither that's classified as an inborn spiritual weapon, how could it have suppressed the copperhead viper zither like this? The disciples exclaimed at the top of their lungs. Overwhelmed by shock, they stared at the zither in Tang Yinchuan's hands with glistening eyes. That's the zither of Hao Zhong, one of them yelled. To which Tang Yinxian began playing once again. She strummed her fingers against the strings gently. In an instant, the surrounding waters flowed over in Hu Qingqing's direction, ready to strike. A zither that's classified as an inborn spiritual weapon. An inborn level zither. One shouted. Hu Qingqing's face soured when she heard Tang Yinshuan's melody. She cringed upon seeing that the water flow was coming at her and, with a quick shift, darted for cover. It was then that she looked down at her legs in shock. She was horrified to discover that, unbeknownst to her, her legs had been entwined by the water flow. As though caught in a swamp, she was unable to free herself from the entanglement of the water no matter how hard she resisted. Such powerful binding force. Senior Hu's losing. She's actually losing. Someone choked. It's only been under a minute, and Senior Hu's about to be defeated, the second voiced in shock. Hao Zhong. Isn't that the zither of Hao Zhong, the number one zither amongst the legendary top 10? The third exclaimed. To think it's the Hao Zhong, the one regarded as the most powerful of all zither. Its ranking is even above the heavenly sound zither. Another added. Hao Zhong. To think it's the zither of Hao Zhong. The last choked. Upon hearing her words and seeing for themselves the attack which Tang Yinshuan launched, the crowd was overwhelmed by shock. On stage, the senior management from the Heavenly Sound sect eyed the zither intently, while it lay in front of Tang Yinshuan. Hao Zhong, to think it's the Hao Zhong, the leading zither of all, they muttered. A horrid look was plastered across the vice sect leader's face, while his heart ached like it had been stabbed and was dripping blood, as he watched his granddaughter cocooned in the streaks of water. You've been defeated, Tang Yinshuan announced before she stopped strumming with her fingers, to which the sound of flowing water disappeared. The crowd turned their heads immediately, and saw that Hu Qingqing had been wrapped up tightly by the streaks. And even though Hu Qingqing struggled till her face turned crimson, the wrap remained entirely unaffected. Such is the horror of the Hao Zhong, along with its prowess. The crowd watched on dumbfoundedly as the scene unfolded before them. Hu Qingqing had been defeated. Furthermore, the defeat had struck upon her so easily and thoroughly. It was as though Tang Yinshuan had barely used any of her combat powers, and delivered a sweeping attack with such ease, like an adult sparring against a child. Yet, everyone was well aware that Tang Yinshuan owed her prowess and dominance to the formidable zither. Zither of Hao Zhong, an inborn spiritual weapon. At the same moment, the crowd recalled the request made by Tang Yinshuan prior to the start of the competition, whereby they would compete fairly using only ordinary zither. Back then, everyone had mocked Tang Yinshuan for having lost her senses. They also ridiculed her for being thick-skinned by asking her competitor to use an ordinary zither instead of a formidable one, simply because she had none herself. It appeared now that the truth was, in fact, the complete opposite. She had in her hands an inborn level zither, and had been out to compete fairly with Hu Qingqing after all. At the thought, the faces in the crowd sizzled in red. They had gauged the kindness and nobility of others using their own mean measures. Oh, how could this be? How could that chap, with nothing to his name, have gifted Tang Yinshuan with an inborn level zither? This can't be. It's impossible, the saint uttered as though in a daze. As he did, he focused on the zither that rested in front of Tang Yinshuan, remaining seated right behind. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.